Going live. Welcome everybody from the new and improved Dan the Wolfman Studios, an undisclosed bunker somewhere in the great U.S. of A. Welcome Hrfunk, great YouTuber, Hrfunk. How you doing, sir?
Real good. How are you doing, Dan?
All right, good. So today, let's give people a bit of a background on yourself, since not all my followers maybe follow your channel, because I got a lot of martial arts people. So let's get into that first, and then we'll talk a little bit about your martial art background, Marine Corps cop stuff, and any funny stories you got.
Okay.
And then we will get really detailed on all kinds of different pistol and revolver platforms and what both of our opinions are, and we'll take questions from people joining in. It looks like we got 3 so far. Hopefully a bunch more join in. So privet to my Russian friend. Jeff Tin, thank you. 87 degrees, St. Augustine. Where's St. Augustine at? I don't know where that's at. Do you know where that's at? St. Augustine? Oh, Florida. Okay. And good morning, sweet dreams. So thank you guys for joining in. All right, Howard, for people, give a brief rundown before we go into your background. Give just a brief synopsis of what your YouTube channel is, Hrfunk. And guys, if you haven't been familiar with, you're going to now, and subscribe to his YouTube channel, Hrfunk.
My YouTube channel, I started about 9 years ago. It's mainly dedicated to firearms and shooting, and I don't really limit it to specific types of firearms and shooting. You might tune in one time and I'll have a video on, say, black powder firearms, and the next time around I might have something with an AR-15 or something like that. Next time might be some other sort of firearm. I enjoy shooting. I'm a lifelong firearms enthusiast. During my time in the Marine Corps, my time as a law enforcement officer, I've had the benefit of attending lots and lots and lots of firearms related training. I've been a firearms instructor since the early 1990s. Former SWAT team operator, longtime SWAT team sniper. So I've done a lot during the course of the last, 3.5 decades. And I like to try to bring that all to my YouTube channel, to my viewers. And I really like to emphasize the fun of shooting. Usually if you watch one of my videos, I'm laughing, I'm having a good time. I try not to take myself too seriously. I think that can be kind of off-putting when somebody is a little too emphatic with some of the things, the points they're trying to make or what have you. So I try to keep it light, try to keep it fun, but I also try to present as much information as I can in a entertaining sort of a way. So I guess in a nutshell, that's my YouTube channel.
And you kind of were on YouTube, what, like 10 years now, but you really blew up kind of the last 3 years, 2-3 years?
Yeah, I had a YouTube presence beginning in 2012. I think late 2012 was when I posted my first video. And for most of that time, the channel slowly built. It was getting up, 15,000 subscribers, 20,000 subscribers. And about, what's it been now? Maybe a year and a half ago, something like that, I posted a video that got a lot of attention, and that one took me from 20,000 subscribers to 30,000 subscribers pretty quickly. And as of today, I'm a little over 37,000 subscribers, and my videos, depending on what it is, will get somewhere between 1,000 to about 7,000, 7,500 on average. Then I've got a few of them that have got quite a few more views than that.
Yeah, that one that blew up to 600 and almost 50,000 views. I remember someone on the phone giving you, hey, do you think maybe it's time to say something? So, you can give me some of those 10,000 subscribers you get. A 10% kickback. Would be nice. Okay, so welcome everybody. Guys, if you can in the comments right now, how is my new studio looking? How is the lighting? Am I showing up a lot better? Because in the past, it looked like all my guests showed up really good on the right side of the screen, but I was kind of pixelated and choppy on the left. And I didn't know if that was my old internet connection or if that was on my laptop, if that was the camera on my laptop. So let me know, am I still kind of choppy, or are we both turning in real nice and sharp. And the new studio I've been promising is good to go. Please, you guys get in the comments and let me know right now. So let's start, I guess, let's go a little bit in your background, starting with the Marine Corps. And if you could tell us a little bit about that, what year you entered, and then you got the callback and all that. So if you could go into some Marine Corps stories, that'd be good.
Okay. I went into the Marine Corps in 1985. Actually, it was April of 1985. And when I joined, I went in as a military policeman. That was my MOS. And at that particular time, the military police, or 5811, or 5800 rather, MOS, was the only one in the Marine Corps for enlisted personnel that had an age limit. You had to be at least 19 years old when you graduated boot camp in order to be an MP. For other jobs in the Marine Corps, you could be 18 or 17, but you had to be at least 19 to be an MP. So I got out of high school. I had to wait a full 365 days in a delayed entry program before I could go in just to get that MOS. Like many, many Marines before me, I went to recruit training at Parris Island, South Carolina. Graduated actually the day before my 19th birthday. I graduated on July 3rd of 1985. And that was close enough age-wise for government work, as they say. Came home for a short leave. And then up until shortly before I went to MP training, the Marine Corps at that time, and I don't think ever has had its own dedicated military police training facility. So prior to my going in, the Marine Corps had sent MPs to Fort McClellan, Alabama, to train at the Army's military police training facility. But by the time I got there, they had changed that, and I was among the first Marine MPs that were sent to Lackland Air Force Base to go through the Air Force security police training. When I first arrived there was a period of time that was all exclusive Marine Corps training. We did what we called field MP work, which was a combination of infantry tactics, things like dealing with enemy prisoners of war, convoy security, things like that. And we also did our advanced firearms training with the 1911A1 pistol, as well as the M870 shotgun. I left Lackland after completing that training in, I believe it was October of 1985. And shortly thereafter, found myself at my first duty station, which was Marine Corps Air Station Cherry Point, North Carolina. I don't know where South Carolina came from. I was there for a little over 2 years and left there, and I went to Marine Corps Air Station Iwakuni, Japan. I was not there for very long before I was shipped off to Yecheon, Korea, where I spent the next several months living in a tent. But also, during my time in Korea, and then after I was done there, I went back to Japan. I had a chance to train with Koreans. I had a chance to train with some of the Japanese when I got back to Japan. I was fighting competitively in those days, so I had a chance to fight both in Korea and Japan, which was a lot of fun. And got some experiences that have stayed with me my entire life. But shortly after I got back, I went back from Korea to Japan. I was back there for the remainder of my overseas tour. And shortly after I came back to this country, I got out of the Marine Corps the first time in 1989. And I thought I was out for good. But 2 years later, Operation Desert Storm rolled around. I was in the Individual Ready Reserve still. And on Valentine's Day, I think, of 1991, I got my orders back into the Marine Corps. So after being out for almost 2 full years, I was right back in. And I didn't do anything particularly heroic during Operation Desert Storm. I was sent down to Marine Corps Air Station New River, North Carolina, to replace Marines that had been shipped off to the Gulf at that time. And that's where I sat for the duration of Operation Desert Storm. So no great war stories or anything to tell from that time. But that's.
So how long were you over there for?
Overseas?
Yeah.
I was over there for a year. Okay. Roughly about 6 months in Korea and 6 months in Japan.
Let's go back to, okay, you're doing MP, but at the Army school. So you got, back in 85, it was still line training, like kind of judo and a little bit of boxing at boot camp back then, right? Pretty much.
It was a kind of a mix of things. You know, there were some throws that were taught that were judo-esque type throws, chokes, you know, some basic strikes, punches, front kicks, things like that. So it's kind of a little bit of a mix in terms of the fighting techniques that were taught in recruit training in those days. Now, by the time I got to the military police training, then it was getting into almost more Aikido type arm locks and wrist locks and takedowns and those kind of things for taking someone into custody with hopefully not doing too much damage to them. But also not bad training and not tremendously dissimilar from what I saw or what we did when I got to the actual police academy a few years later.
Okay. So arrest and control type tactics,
Right.
cuffing techniques, getting the hammer lock, getting the arm behind there and control the wrist block to get in the cuffs and all that kind of stuff.
Yep.
Do you remember, did they have the boxing in the little cubicles where you're 2 by 2 feet and you had to just box it out with somebody? Were they doing that in '85 at boot camp?
No, we didn't have. We had the pugil sticks.
Yeah.
That we used to use. I don't remember doing any boxing in those days. Not like in recruit training or something like that.
Yeah, at boot camp when I went through. So we did pugil sticks. I think we just did that like in a ring, maybe like a sumo ring or something like that. Yeah. And then in the finals, I think we were on a log or something crazy. And then we also got like boxing in like a little cubicle. So I'm like, okay, let's try my cool Taekwondo thing. Do I block and counter punch? Boom, 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 boom. Okay, that doesn't work. Okay, the lesson was aggression sometimes is the answer. So I guess that's why it was. And then I'm like, I tried that like twice, and I'm getting bombed because you're like, literally, it was like 2 by 2 feet or something, 2 yards, like 2 yards at most. And then I'm like, okay, this is just to teach you firefighting. I get it now. So right at the end of the 2-minute round or whatever it was, and I'm like, okay, this is just going to the stock exchange and stuff. And I think that's what the lesson is, not teaching you fighting, but teaching you aggression and being in the fight. And Marines are kind of known for doing that kind of thing. So that's cool. When you got over to Korea, is that when you had your first experience with Taekwondo, or?
No, I was actually already a black belt in Taekwondo when I got there.
Okay.
My martial arts training started when I was 14, and I had the extreme good fortune of training with a gentleman here in Ohio who was a just tremendous instructor. He had trained under 2 native Koreans starting back in the 1960s, and by the time I met him, he had already been training for 20 plus years. And like I said, very, very talented martial artist and just an extremely good instructor. And I trained with him. And when I started training in martial arts, I really found the first thing that I was really passionate about. And I just absolutely threw myself into that training. And that was really from the time I was 14 until I left for the Marine Corps when I was 18. That was what I spent all of my time doing, was training in Taekwondo. And eventually I started to compete. And I never did a lot of competing in, kata competitions or, breaking or anything like that. I was always a fighter, and I just absolutely loved it. And you remember back in the 1980s, it seemed like every tournament sort of had its own rules, and some of them, were light contact was good enough to score a point, and then other ones you almost had to knock somebody out to score a point, and some of them they stopped after every point for the judges to score, and then other ones they just kept going and the judges tried to keep track. So every tournament was a little bit different, but didn't matter to me. I traveled around quite a bit in this area, and then by the time I got into the Marine Corps, I was already, like I said, a black belt when I went in. And I got to Cherry Point, and I started to train with a gentleman there who at that time was 4th degree black belt. His name was George Nobles. And I trained with him for a couple of years, and that was when everything was gearing up toward getting Taekwondo into the Olympics in 1988. And so there was a lot of push to make that transition to Olympic style Taekwondo. And I started fighting in those kind of tournaments. And I actually, in 1980, what year was that? I think it was 1987. I placed third in the Maryland State Championships, Maryland State Taekwondo Championships. And that qualified me for the Pan Am Games that year. And the Pan Am Games were going to be an Olympic qualifier. And I went to my bosses in the Marine Corps. I said, hey, you know, I qualified for the Pan Am Games. I got an outside chance. If I do well, I could go to the Olympics. So that request went up the chain. Then the answer came back down the chain. And they said, you know what? This is not a recognized sport yet. It's just a demo sport in '88. So you're not going anywhere, except we're going to send you to cold weather training. So so ended my Olympic aspirations.
Congratulations, young buck. You wanted to go do something cool. You instead get shipped off to the Arctic or something.
Now, in a sad irony, I was in Seoul in 1988, standing outside the Olympic Stadium, looking in through the gate.
No.
Practice the opening ceremonies, but I was not there to compete or anything. So,
oh, geez, that's pretty rough. They own you. Yeah, wow. So you was it just always different, or you kind of, because I grew up WTF, which is Olympic style. You came up under ITF.
Yes.
Allowed like not hook punches, but straight punches to the head. Is that kind of how it used to be?
Yes. The hand techniques were very similar to Shotokan, and still are, truthfully. But the kicking techniques, as you know, in Taekwondo, were always emphasized a lot more than they are in some other systems. And the thing that I liked about ITF was it was originally designed, and you probably know this, designed as a military martial art, and it was all about combat. It was about, you know, fighting, defending yourself, and all of that. It was not really geared so much toward competition. And one of my complaints about Taekwondo as it exists currently is it's made the transition where it's all about competition and not as much about the actual, you know, defensive aspects anymore. And even when I got to Korea, at that time, I don't know if it's still like this, but their military still trained in Taekwondo. That was required of their military personnel. So when I got there as a black belt, it was great because I would do things like go for a run around the base perimeter, and there were guard posts every so often. And each guard post had a heavy bag hanging there so that the guards could practice their punches and kicks and things like that while they were out there on post. So I could go for a run and just stop every however far they were, 200 yards, and do some punches and run another couple hundred yards, do some kicks. And the guards would see me, and to the degree we could, we would talk back and forth. And when they found out that I'd trained in Taekwondo and I was a black belt, it was like I was a member of the club. These guys loved me. So the next thing I know, they're taking me out to some of the Korean bars and, you know, buying me beers and stuff like that. But it was a lot of fun.
My favorite beer is Korean beer called Obi. Obi
beer. I remember.
Fine. In the big bottles. That's my favorite beer I've had around the world. And I can never find it unless you happen to like have a Korean grocery store near you. It's like impossible to find. That's funny. Was there any ever bar brawls going on in Korea when you were there?
Well, there were, but I was an MP, so I was usually the one wading in to break up the bar brawl. I wasn't the one initiating it. Now, another cool thing about Korea, and I think you'll appreciate this, while I was there, I don't even know how I met this guy, but there was a guy who lived in a small village, maybe a half mile from the gate of the base where we were staying. And we were actually living on the backside of a Korean air base. And if you ever watch the TV show MASH, that's exactly how we lived. You know, the tents, the plywood buildings, all that kind of thing. And I met this guy, and he taught Taekwondo. And he invited me to come out and train with him. So I thought, this is great. And this guy at the time was considerably older than I was. I was, you know, like 20, and this guy was probably in his mid 40s. But it was, when I went to his place, it was like something you would see in the movie. He had, you know, the stone wall around his backyard that was just like, you know, a dirt backyard, and he had the heavy bag hanging out there, and it was like something from the old martial arts movies, going out to train with this guy, you know, and we would work out, and would actually do some fighting. He was a good fighter, but that was tremendous. And for the life of me, I can't remember this guy's name anymore. It's been too many years, but that was just one of those unique experiences you get from being in the Far East and being involved in martial arts and the people you run into and the things you get to do.
It sounds very cool. When you mentioned running in the bars as your job as an MP, so like when you were in Korea and then in Japan, would you guys get the call from someone above, like, hey, two of our guys are being assholes, go round them up? Is that kind of how it worked?
No, it was usually we'd get the call from somebody at the bar that, hey, we got a fight going on here. We got some other kind of problem. And then we would respond to that. So it's kind of an odd experience because you're in a foreign country where, our laws don't necessarily apply except to our personnel who are subject to the Uniform Code of Military Justice. So, we would go out there and we'd be waiting. And in some cases, the people that actually live there are thinking, what's the problem here? Let them fight it out. Well, no, we can't do that. We got to go in and break this up. And
now, were things a little more lenient still in those times in the 80s where, like, that didn't mean he was not, going to spend the night in jail and getting what would you call, like a chit on his, getting written up in a bad way that would hurt his career? Did those things kind of slide a little easier back in the 80s than they would nowadays? Nowadays, it's like, they crack down. They don't let the boys play anymore like they used to.
I think what was different in those days was not so much the things that were on our end as the military police, as much as they were the way the different commands handled those type of things. Whereas back in those days, somebody might get some kind of, unattractive details, I'll say, for, some period of time as punishment for whatever they did. Nowadays they might be looking at something much more severe. It might be, some sort of a discharge or whatever. I think that's probably the biggest thing. And especially in the Marine Corps where, I think they almost expected, guys are going to go out, guys are going to get in fights. This kind of thing is going to happen. So they didn't encourage it, but it wasn't in the punishment phase dealt with quite as severely in those days as it is nowadays.
Yeah, I think everything's, became micromanaged more and more. I've read about half of Colin Powell's book, and he kind of gets into that, and there was like a bit of a changing of the times, and it was better when base commander kind of had more leeway to deal with things, to push someone's butt into gear the right way and kind of, not necessarily do something that's going to kick this guy out or get his career totally, in the gutter. I think it used to be a little bit more that way, and probably should be now. Paper pushers and kind of run everything, it seems like. But okay, I just wanted your opinion on that. Do you have any, before you go into law enforcement, do you have any particularly interesting or funny stories you can remember from your time in the Marine Corps?
Whenever somebody asks me that, I draw a blank. And then, later on, when I'm not talking to anybody, I'll think, oh, yeah, we had this happen or we had that happen or whatever. Just thinking about fights, there was this would have been New Year's Eve, 1988. We got a call of a fight at the enlisted club. And this was like right at midnight or thereabouts. And the Marines and the CBs were both in the E club, and somebody looked at somebody wrong or whatever, and the fight started. And there were probably 6 or 8 of us that were out on patrol on the base that night. And we all went to the E club. And I remember turning the corner to start down the street toward the club, and it looked like just a riot out in front of the club. There was just this mass of people, and they were all fighting. I don't know how many people were out there, but it was like something out of an Old West movie or something, like the saloon fight where everybody's just swinging. So like 6 or 8 of us waded into that melee, and we should have gotten our butts kicked. I did. The good Lord was watching over us, I guess, is all I can say, because we started latching onto people and handcuffing them, tossing them in the back of cars, and it seemed like every time we drug somebody out and put them in a car, there were fewer people when we went back as they started making their way away. And eventually we got that thing calmed down. But to this day, it was the biggest fight I've ever seen in my life. I have no idea how many people were involved in that.
Sounds like a good New Year's party. That's how the different branches, show some love and get along a little. That's pretty good. So you're out for 2 years. Boom, back in the Desert Shield, Desert Storm, right? Desert Shield, and then when you got out, it's like, okay, what do I do now? Is that what segued you into law enforcement?
No, it was actually kind of the other way around. I decided at a fairly young age that I wanted to go into law enforcement. And like most kids, that was really driven by, what I saw on TV and in the movies and all of that. And really, it's funny when I think back about it, because that's what started my martial arts training. And it's what one of the things that really drove my interest in firearms, because on TV or in the movies, cops only need to know how to do two things. They need to know how to fight, and they need to know how to shoot. Nothing else. Don't have to write anything. Don't have to be able to talk. Don't have to be able to testify in court. None of that stuff. But they need to be able to fight, and they need to be able to shoot. So I thought, well, I need to learn how to fight. So I started my martial arts training, and I need to learn how to shoot better. So and when I got out of high school, here in Ohio, you can't become a law enforcement officer. You can't be commissioned until you're at least 21 years old. So I had to figure out something to do from the time that I graduated high school until I could actually become a law enforcement officer. So I thought about, there are different colleges you can go to that have law enforcement courses and everything, but my decision was to go into the military and ultimately go into the Marine Corps. So I went in as a military policeman for that reason. When I got out of the Marine Corps, then it was like, okay, now how do I actually go about getting a job as a police officer? And so I started just, traveling, hitting every police department, sheriff's department, whatever, in the area in a ever larger and larger circle. And eventually I found a small department in central Ohio that was hiring. And I managed to get a job there initially as a dispatcher. And then they commissioned me as a part-time police officer and sent me to the police academy. The academy they sent me to was the Ohio Highway Patrol Academy, which also runs a basic police training academy for people that are, other than highway patrol. So I attended that in 1990, actually January to I think April of 1990. When I graduated, then shortly thereafter, I became a full-time officer with that department. I stayed there for another year or so, and then I got hired by a medium-sized city here in Ohio, which is where I spent most of my career. I was there from June of 1991 until July of 2014. I retired from there in 2014, and when I retired from that department, it was really just, I didn't have any plans or anything. I thought, I'm just going to see what comes next. Literally about a day and a half after I retired, I got a call from somebody saying, hey, you're interested in a chief's position. I said, I don't know. Tell me about it. As it turned out, there was a small village not far from where I live, and their chief was leaving, and they needed an interim police chief. And they had heard that I left the city where I worked. So they got a hold of me and asked me if I was interested in the interim position. And it was a great opportunity because in that village, my daughter attended school. In fact, she still does. She's starting her senior year here in a couple of weeks. But I looked into the job. I thought it was a great opportunity. I went ahead and took the interim position. Then I applied for the actual permanent police chief's job, which I ultimately got. And I stayed there for about 7 years, or just shy of 7 years, and didn't leave that until just this past March. So over the course of, 30-something years, that's the time that I've spent in law enforcement here in Ohio.
Okay. I'm sure you have some stories about your time in Ohio, even though you were you dealing with more difficult stuff when you were in the city versus when you were more being a chief of a smaller town?
Well, it's hard to say what it's more difficult. It's just different, especially working as a chief, because then the responsibilities change. You have so much more, staffing the department, equipment, training, all those kind of things that all of a sudden become your concern when you're a chief, as opposed to being an officer on the street or a sergeant in a larger city. The thing that changes with the smaller departments and the larger departments, and a lot of people don't realize this, the larger departments have a lot more resources at their disposal than the smaller departments do. So whereas when I worked for the city, we had a personnel manager with a staff to take care of things like, applicants and a lot of the hiring process and things like that. We had dispatchers, we had clerks, we had people that have been trained as crime scene techs. We had a detective with, different things like that. In a small department, there's me to handle all that kind of thing. And then depending on what happens on the street, there might be another officer that's available to handle, the calls that come in or whatever. And then sometimes as chief, I might be going out to help on the calls or take a crash report or something like that. So police work, I really think, is the same everywhere. There are aspects of it that change, but the job is always the same. It's always, working with people, dealing with their problems, trying to help people. And it doesn't really much matter whether it's a large urban environment or a small rural village. It's really always the same job.
Okay. I actually had a good law enforcement experience yesterday because I was in the middle of nowhere and I got a flat tire. And barely was able to pull off of a 2-lane going that way road where a lot of semi trucks go, and I barely was able to get off, but not quite enough where my ass end wasn't in the lane. But boy, if the truck driver wasn't paying attention, it wouldn't be good. The sheriff stopped and stayed with me for an hour, and he even helped me get a tow truck, figure out. He's like, "No, I know the guys that are still open." He's like, "Look, all the Walmarts are closing, 5, 6, 7. Try and find you one that's open that has the right tire size." And he really helped me out and squared me away. Barely got towed, 18 miles away to the Walmart that actually was going to be nice and stay open. I'm like the one closer that's like, "Oh no, we're too busy at 5:30. I'm like, "Lady, you're open at 7. They always try that because they want to go home early for the day. I'm like, "It's just one tire. Prepare it." But he really helped me out and squared me away. And then after he'd already been with me like a half hour, I don't know if it was going to help him justify it to his bosses while he was staying in one spot for an hour. But he's like, "Can I run you?" I'm like, "Yeah, no problem, man. Here's my ID." That's fine. Maybe helped. Because it was like, he's like, "Yeah, if you were over a little bit more, I would only stop for a second." But I'm like, "Yeah, it's kind of a hazard, but not, but it's not somewhere I didn't even want to stay in my car long." I'm like, these truck drivers on these roads, they tend to be, nodding off, and they're taking on, a lot of drugs. Speaking of drugs, is that kind of what, do you think that's the biggest contributing factor is illegal narcotics and even prescription drug abuse being the biggest thing that precipitates or causes most of the issues that you have to deal with?
That's definitely a big factor. I don't know if it's the biggest. I mean, there are so many societal pressures and circumstances all that contribute to a lot of the disharmony we see in various communities. To try to pick the biggest, I think illegal drugs is a large contributing factor. I don't know if I can say with 100% certainty it's the biggest. Has
it kind of changed over the period of time that you've seen, in the different areas you've worked? Has things kind of ebbed and flowed and gotten worse? And has it changed from, I don't know, is it still cocaine in the 90s and then meth really hit and now heroin's making a comeback? What?
Yeah, that always seems to be cyclic, and it always seems strange to me where things, it's almost like fashions, where something's fashionable for a while, then it goes out of style for a while, then it comes back in for a while. And I've noticed that a lot over the years. Something oddball like, psilocybin mushrooms or something like that, all of a sudden will make a comeback for a short period of time and then they fade away again. It's just, kind of strange the way that works.
A lot of the guys in the comments saying, or if anyone had to pull me over, I wish it would be Hrfunk, and you're a good representative. Law enforcement. Speaking of which, I told the guy that I didn't give him my concealed card because he just wanted to run me. I'm like, okay. I said, but usually I hand it over. And I said, most law enforcement officers, I hand them my ID with my concealed carry card right underneath. I said, most guys seem to appreciate it. He says, but I told him, I said, but I also had one guy's like, I don't need all that. He's just writing the ticket right away. My recent experience where the judge made me stay an extra couple hours just to prove who was boss. He made me stay in his courtroom an extra couple hours to give him the paperwork he already knew I had on me to try and lower my BS fee down from $119 to $50. Anyway, there's my little rant. Did you in Ohio? Do you have a duty to inform if you have your concealed?
Yeah, if someone has a concealed handgun license and they're carrying their firearm.
Okay.
A lot of people don't realize that. A lot of people think that they have to announce that whether they're carrying a firearm or not. But if they have a concealed handgun license and they're carrying their firearm, they're required to inform the officer if they have a law enforcement contact that they have a concealed handgun license and they're carrying a firearm. Now, there's something in Ohio law that says that if the officer otherwise knows, like, for example, they run a license plate and it comes back and shows the person has a concealed handgun license, that the person isn't necessarily in violation of the law if they don't make that announcement. But I always tell people, just err on the side of caution. Make sure that, if you're carrying a firearm, that you announce to the officer. And it is if they're stopped for a law enforcement purpose. If an officer is walking by and says, "Hey, nice day, huh?" The person does say, "Hey, I got firearm. Here's my car." Just it is if they're stopped for a law enforcement purpose, like traffic stop, or "Sir, I need to talk to you for a second. Could you come here?" Something like that. That's
because technically a traffic stop is a detainment, so it's something like you're being detained or investigated for some reason, right?
Right.
I asked him if I showed up yesterday, and he said no. He was a sheriff, so maybe in that state it was just county by county it shows up. So maybe it only shows up if it's the county that issues them. I thought it was a statewide thing, and I think most states is a statewide thing. It didn't come up when he ran me, but it sounds like in Ohio it's a statewide thing that it comes up.
Yes.
Okay. So I thought that's how most states were, but maybe some are just by if you happen to be pulled over in the county that happens to issue the permit, maybe that's how some work, which I didn't realize. Do you feel better when someone does have it? When you pull them over, it's so rare that someone that just recently passed a background check that isn't a felon would do something stupid like fight with a cop and be a felon. It's such a low percentage. Does it make you feel a little safer, like on a traffic stop, if someone does have their concealed carry permit?
Actually, it does, because I know that this person has, taken the steps necessary, gone through the background checks, everything. They're trying to abide by the law. They're not just saying, "The hell with that. I'm going to carry a firearm, do whatever." So that does make me feel a little bit better. And I don't worry about those. I don't think, "Oh, geez, this guy's got a gun." Usually they'll say something like, "I have a concealed handgun license and I have my firearm with me." I'll ask them where it is, where is it? Well, it's whatever, on my hip here in a holster or whatever. Okay, just don't have any contact with it or do anything. Then we go on with whatever it was that I stopped them for in the first place.
What about in this scenario, which Joe Morgan says, what if they're carrying a Glock? You give them a ticket right away.
Well, that's a little different kettle of fish right there.
I gotta say, it's for the glockenspiel. I don't want to say hate. Hate's a strong word that both you and me have put out. Karma has certainly gotten a hold of you in what is now in your current position? What is your carry weapon?
Yep.
You
Yes.
brought it on yourself.
The firearms gods have taken some sport with me and caused me to end up having to carry one of those things, which, and I've said for a long time, they're not bad pistols. They are actually good pistols. They function very reliably, all of that. I just personally don't care for them.
Yeah,
there are other things that I like better.
He's being a little bit more politically correct. For the less politically correct version, guys, I have a recent video of honest reasons why Glocks suck. 10mm Glocks. And I make exceptions. The 45 and 10mm Glocks I don't hate as bad, and the Glock 48's kind of all right. But check out my video, honest reasons why Glocks suck, and I compare it to the Taurus G3C because it's a budget firearm, and I'm like, I even forgot to point out stuff like I'm like ergonomics, metal sights, better mag ejection. Oh, there's stippling. Oh, there's a rest for your an accelerator place for your thumb pad, which you talked about in your recent like SIG 320 is a little slick. I did message the girl. I'll try to see if I can get you one of these little American flag stippled things, which will look good on that pistol particularly, that you can put there to have. I think most people call them accelerator pads now. I don't know if there's another term for it, but gas pedals, I've heard, it does make a big difference. Yeah, so that's kind of funny. In your experience in law enforcement, before we start talking about different pistols and revolvers and all that kind of stuff, and then in all your time on SWAT, is there any experiences that stand out as that you want to get into today and you don't have to, but more serious stuff you've had to deal with, and then if there's any like really funny stories or oddball things you're like, I didn't think I was going to deal with this morning. like if you want to share any of those with us, I mean, 30 years is a long time, so the floor is yours.
When it comes to SWAT stories, one of them that comes to mind, this was, it's one of those things that it's probably a lot funnier if you actually see it. I don't know if I'll do it justice trying to describe it, but we had an apartment where we were going to serve a high-risk warrant, and I can't remember if I was the first one through the door on this. It was one of these where, we had the search warrant. It was a no-knock warrant. We had to make a forced entry, all that kind of thing. Person inside is presumed to be armed and dangerous, which is the whole reason for the no-knock warrant. And it was an apartment with several rooms. So we had already made the tactical plan that when we made the entry, we were going to divide into elements, and various 2-officer teams were going to go into the various rooms of this apartment and clear it. And we had a floor plan for the apartment. In fact, we were pretty familiar with this apartment complex. We've been in these a lot of times, so we more or less knew where everything was. So we all get up there. We had a officer at the time who was a big guy. He was our RAM guy. I don't know, I always thought if the door didn't come down, he might knock the whole wall down because he was just a big, strong guy. But I remember he hit the door with that ram. Boom, it goes open in, we're dividing up. Guys are going this way, guys are going this way. And myself and another officer went into the bedroom, and that's where the bad guy was. And this was at, I forget what, some ridiculous time in the morning, like 3 a.m. or something like that, hoping that everybody be asleep instead of being there high and armed and waiting to shoot us when we came through the door. So we go through that door, police, put your hands up, and the guy is in bed, and he looks, now this is, scary, armed and dangerous, might shoot police officers. The guy screams like a little girl and like throws the blanket over his head, and he's hiding. It was the funniest thing. And so now we're trying not to laugh as we're trying to take this guy into custody. But yeah, that's just one of those things that like, I don't know if I'm doing it justice telling the story, but it was funny to see.
I imagine you guys had a good chuckle the rest of the night over this. these guys, a lot of these street guys act real tough. I'll shoot you, I'll kill you, and whatever. And then all of a sudden, they big whimpering babies. Have you had a lot of those guys like, I'll kill you, cop, and all that? And then you put the cuffs on them, they start crying and begging to call their moms and stuff.
Oh yeah. The call the mom thing, it just always amazes me. You'll have a full-grown adult, big, tough, bad guy, whatever, and he gets to the booking room and he wants to call his mommy. What? I think this is part of the reason you're here to begin with.
Yeah, maybe. Maybe that's too funny. You got any other funny or interesting stories from your time on the job?
Oh, probably, but I don't think I'll go into some.
Didn't you have some naked girl once or something? And she was
I cannot confirm nor deny that story.
Plausible deniability. All right, that's too funny. And then I'll just share. Guys, I recently, as a civilian, went through a SWAT school, and it was an interesting experience to do it and to see what everyone goes through, and people that are anti-law enforcement with all the BS that's gone on in the last year and a half. I say when it's ticket collection and it's just basically taxation, it's not my favorite part. We all don't like things like that. But when you have a guy, whenever these guys, what the news and the media, MSM is making people think is like these poor people that are so innocent. When you actually look into things, they are multiple time felon. They've been in and out of prison their whole life. They've threatened women with knives and guns to their pregnant stomachs and things of this. So when SWAT gets called on people, they get called for a good reason. In general, would you say that's correct, Howard?
Yes. I mean, SWAT teams exist for a reason. And, it's a situation where it's not safe. And really, the reason SWAT exists is because that's the safest way for both the officers involved and actually the suspects involved to be able to either take them into custody or execute search warrants or whatever, hopefully without anyone getting hurt. But if the bad guys involved in this take a hostile action toward the officers or toward anyone else, that there are officers that are trained and equipped to deal with that situation. I spent many years as a sniper for our SWAT team, and I've watched a lot of people through the scope of my sniper rifle, and there's one particular individual that'll never know how lucky he is to still be here. But that's officers are trying to approach those situations in a manner to be able to do the things that need to be done legally in the safest way possible.
Yeah. And yeah, I mean, guys, it really, the week that I spent at the SWAT school, we did focused on a lot of searching, a big building, long hallways, doors different ways, hiding spots built in as people have cubbies and that kind of thing. And when we were going in, there was some munitions and stuff, and getting evaluated from above as they could see and evaluate. We had hidden bad guys everywhere. Were on the wall on pictures and having to take them out behind doors and that kind of thing. But even one of them was a guy like this with binoculars. I mean, you're right there coming. I mean, it's split-second decisions, and I don't think that's what how intense it is. Split-second decisions. And also, guys, I had someone come in after a very recent shooting. He had been shot. One of his partners was killed. It was a horrible high ammo count incident, let's say. And, he had PTSD, and a lot of these officers that, even if you don't have to pull the trigger during your career, high stress situations, whether you're in military, law enforcement, or whatever, high stress situations do cause PTSD. And I think that's also an issue that we have to recognize that our law enforcement and military deal with. So there's my 2 cents on that, if it means anything.
And if I could springboard off of that for a minute, Dan, I'll share 2 quick stories, one of which involves a good friend of mine. Again, another search warrant we were serving. We're actually assisting another city who had requested our team come and help them with a search warrant service. So we were going to make the entry, secure the house, and then they were going to come in and actually serve the search warrant. And this is another situation where we hit the door, we go in. This time, everybody's wide awake, and we got people running that we're trying to stop. Now, we've got other people around the outside of the house to keep anybody from getting away. But my friend has somebody take off running from him, and my friend is now following him through the house, with a submachine gun, police, stop, stop running. The guy runs into a small enclosed porch at the back of the house, runs over to where there's a washing machine and reaches down for something. And my friend believes this guy's going for a weapon, and he's, got the submachine gun up, same thing, sights on target, finger on trigger. And at the last second, the guy finally, gives up. And I don't even know there was no weapon there. I don't know what he was doing. I mean, had my friend shot him as he was reaching down there would have been every reason to believe that this guy was, fleeing, disobeying verbal commands and everything else, so that he could go and arm himself and then, come up from there. And in that instant, if you wait until the person's actually coming around, then it's just who's fastest on the trigger. And if it's a tie, the officer loses just like the bad guy. But as it turned out, nobody was shot in that instance, and that was the right decision. But it could just as easily have gone the other way. The person that I was talking about that's lucky to still be here, I was watching this guy through my sniper scope from about 50 yards away, and I had to make the decision to either kill this guy or not kill him within the span of about 2.5 seconds. And it was finger on the trigger, slack out of the trigger, and I just decided at the last instant, no, and that happened to be, in that instance, the right decision. But it could just as easily have been the wrong decision.
Yeah. And it amazes me that how disingenuous and hypocritical, especially lately, but all the time, but especially lately, mainstream media is and stuff with that. It's like, go in there like I did and do force on force with these guys and feel what it's like when someone's reaching for something or hidden under a bed or a cubby hole behind the door, and they're surprising you, and you gotta decide shoot or not shoot, and you don't know what's in their hand. Is it a knife? Is it a club? Is it binoculars? Yeah, for some strange reason. I mean, it'd be nice if they just did a little bit of the force on force and saw what it's like to make microsecond life and death decisions. So, pretty crazy times. Before we get off this SWAT stuff, let's ask about some of the weapons and tactics and maybe how that's changed in time. So being a sniper, were you pretty much using a 308 bolt gun during doing that?
Early on, that was my main rifle, or my only rifle really, was a Remington 700P chamber for the 308 cartridge. And that was my exclusive rifle for a lot of years. Somewhere around the mid 2000s, I also started to use a AR-15 semi-auto sniper system that was a 5.56 cartridge. In fact, that was the one I was watching the guy through that I said that I had to make that decision whether to shoot him or not. And I chose the rifle that I was going to use based on the circumstances that I was expecting to encounter at that particular location. If it was one bad guy, and particularly if I was going to be a longer range, then I looked more at the 700P. If I thought it was going to be multiple bad guys and I was going to be closer to where they were going to be, then I would usually opt for the AR. So I tried to tailor the system I was using for the situation that I was dealing with.
Okay. As far as, like you mentioned, the guy with the subgun, did you see how, like, in the 90s, everyone wanted subguns, and then we're getting away from shotguns, and then eventually turned more to AR platforms? Is that kind of how things went?
Before I was with the SWAT team, and this goes back into the early '90s, our team actually had Uzis, if you can believe it or not. But those went away pretty quickly, and they were replaced by Colt 9mm submachine guns. So it was an AR platform from the mid '90s on, and the 9mm sub gun was a good firearm as far as that goes. The 9mm cartridge, I think, left a little bit to be desired out of that kind of a platform. So eventually we went over to the 5.56 cartridge and stuck with the AR platform. But that gave us a little bit more of a ballistic advantage, plus a little bit more range as opposed to the 9mm. And also a little bit more controllability, because the Colt 9mm sub gun was a straight blowback system. Yeah. So it had that really heavy bolt. And the strong buffer spring, and you had all that reciprocating mass. So shooting it was a little bit more difficult to control than shooting something like an MP5 or what have you. And actually a little bit more even than the 5.56 cartridge later on, because it had the gas operated system.
Now, for the 9mm guns back then, were you guys using ball ammo because they wouldn't function that well with hollow points, or would they actually function?
No, it would function with hollow points. Okay. And we used to use those. Let's see if I can remember back. I know for a period of time back in the 90s, we were using the Federal BPLE round, which is 115 grain plus P plus round. Eventually, we started using the Spear Gold Dots and Winchester Ranger ammunition, things like that. But it was always some version of a hollow point we were running through those things.
Okay. Yeah, actually, I would like to talk about ammo, because I think Ohio, you're probably very familiar with that round, the 9BPLE, because I think that's what Ohio State Police was using to good effect in the late 80s, early 90s, to very good effect. And the Border Patrol also, so in two different climates, the Border Patrol was also very successful with it, and a lot of Texas departments.
Yeah, I still have a good opinion of that cartridge to this day. In fact, I think I've still got some of them hidden around here someplace. But if I needed to load up with that, I wouldn't feel like I was somehow in danger or not going to be able to defend myself.
Let's go back a bit. Now, what was your first experience with firearms?
I can remember being very young, probably 5, 6 years old or whatever, and having my dad take me out and start learning to shoot a .22 rifle. He had a .22 revolver. I can remember shooting that. So, I mean, I was starting to shoot at a very, very young age. And like a lot of kids back in those days, eventually I had a BB gun that I was shooting, and one thing and another, and graduated to my own .22 rifle and my own .22 pistol years later. So by the time I was 15, 16 years old, I already had a couple of my own firearms, and it was not uncommon for me to come home from school, grab one of those and go traipsing out through the woods or whatever, or get a hold of one of my buddies and we'd go hunting. So I've been handling firearms, shooting firearms really for literally as long as I can remember.
And so even, I mean, I don't think it's uncommon for a kid at 10 years old to get a .22 rifle. Back in most of America, that it seems everyone wants to act like isn't part of America. And yet you didn't go shoot up a school, you didn't kill one of your buddies in an argument or anything like that.
I can remember distinctly in my mind during deer season here in Ohio, when kids would get up in the morning, they would go out deer hunting, they'd stay in their stand for however long until it was time for school. Then they'd come out of the stand, drive to school. There were shotguns in the racks, in the parking lot out in the school, and nobody thought twice about it. It was just, okay, so-and-so was hunting and they came to school. And when school was over, they would go back out and hunt some more. And no, nobody worried about that. That was just the way things were done back then. And really, none of the kids even had a thought of doing something like that. That would never enter somebody's mind.
Probably because they grew up with dads being involved, even if they weren't always, but they taught them how to hunt, taught them how to maybe change oil, taught them how to do some things and how to be a man. And part of that was growing up as a kid maybe shooting and responsibility, firearm safety rules, maybe even shooting a bird or some kind of varmint or something like that. You learn about life and death and that kind of thing. And I think that was the passage of Americana. And if you had a father, grandfather, I mean, for me, it was more my grandfather in that terms, but you had somebody, and it would never even occur to them because they were taught right and wrong from childhood. And I think that's a lot of what missing is because everyone's on their cell phones and social media bombarded, and parents or everyone's at the table looking at their cell phone instead of talking to each other, instead of teaching them right from wrong. Remember when that actually was a thing? So I think that made all the difference in the world. It's not, we have millions upon millions upon millions of firearms, and statistically it's not an issue. They tell you it is. It's definitely not an issue with rifles. Like the numbers under 300 out of the millions upon millions upon millions of all rifles, let alone just evil black rifles.
Yes.
If the BS is so crazy, if you actually look at the numbers and study the actual true statistics, which the CDC also hid as far as concealed carriers. CDC did a study in the 90s, and they hid that for over 20 years. And boy, they try to make that hard to find now. But they've been doing all kinds of funny stuff, haven't they? When was your first kind of firearms competition? Because you're big into long range shooting and all that. Was that after you were a sniper, or do you remember going to like some kinds of firearms competitions when you were younger?
I went to some local competitions that were for police officers back during the 1990s, but I really couldn't get into a lot of competitive shooting for quite a few years because in law enforcement, the schedule we work, the hours you work, it's 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, lots of weekends, which is when most of the competitions take place. And as a younger officer without much seniority, trying to take vacation or get time off or whatever is a difficult prospect. So it's just extremely hard to be able to get into some sort of competitive endeavor while you're still early in your law enforcement career. In fact, that's one of the big reasons that I stopped fighting competitively in martial arts, was because I just, with my schedule the way it was hard to even train, let alone try to compete. And finally, to answer your question, yes, my training and my time as a sniper really fueled that desire to want to get into competitive long-range shooting. So when I finally got to the point where I had enough seniority, I could take time off and get some time to go to competitions, I started to look around and see what was available. And pretty quickly, I found a nearby club. In fact, it's the Ashland Lake Gun Club here in Ohio that has a high-power rifle program, and it's a very good program. And not only the surface rifle competition, but they do some tactical rifle. They do some sniper rifle competitions, lots of different things. So I went over and I started shooting there. And from there, I started making the trip to Camp Perry. Eventually, I started going down to the CMP Eastern Games down in Camp Butner, North Carolina. And I've tried to get other places different times just for the matches. I also had a unique experience to be able to go down to Bang Steel in Virginia a couple of years ago. I don't know if you saw that video, but they've got a great program down there. We're able to shoot out to 1,000, even out to 1,200 yards. And I was able to go down and shoot on their range and with their instructions. So that was a tremendous experience too. So really long-range precision shooting is my passion. I enjoy shooting handguns. I enjoy shooting shotguns. I enjoy shooting all the other things. But being able to take a bullet and place it precisely where you want it at extreme long range is just something I enjoy doing. And I think a lot of this, and I think you'll appreciate this too, comes back to that martial arts training. Shooting to me is just another martial art, and all the same things that are required for any martial art are there, focus, discipline, technique, self-confidence, all that type of thing, perseverance. everything that's required in all the other martial arts are absolutely there in shooting. And it's that same thing where you're really only competing against yourself to try to see how good you can become at doing something. That's really what's there in the long range shooting, particularly for me.
Yeah, I think, in fact, I wish more of the 2A community would look at firearms training as a martial art. And considering it a martial art, not just like, well, why do I need to worry about a guy with a knife? I carry a gun, Like, you need to wake up a little bit, buddy. So I kind of wish they would. But yeah, that sounds like how someone would describe archery. It's also similar to like how the Japanese considered calligraphy.
Yeah.
Anything worth doing is worth doing with a focus and a goal of as much perfection as you can have. I haven't done long range. I haven't done anything past 600 meters myself. So that's something eventually I'd like to get into. A little bit expensive though, all the gear and even the ammo and stuff like that. So it's something I would like to see if I would still be good at or not. Though more and more as I'm aging, I'm a right-hand shooter, but I'm left eye dominant now completely.
Really?
So yeah, so I don't know how that would play into things. Everything I did was open sights. So long range, it's expensive. What are you using like a 3-9, a 3-12, or LPVO, or what kind of?
Depends on which rifle I'm shooting. I've got, for example, the one system I have set up has the loophole 4.5 to 14 by 50 scope set up on it. I've got another one. If I'm using my vintage sniper rifle, my 1903 A4, that's got a replica 2.2 scope on that would have been a World War II era scope. So it just depends all on what I'm shooting and the type of competition that I'm going to be in that day.
I still think 308, especially or 7.62, 308 can take 7.62 usually. I don't know how many platforms, how much experience you have. It kind of depends on the platform, but I think most 308s can shoot 7.62. I still think that's a good cartridge. Can still do a lot at a lot of ranges, but obviously in recent, I guess 15 years now, there's been so many different Wildcat cartridges and 6.5, a bunch of different 6.5s and 6.8 and stuff like that, or 338 Lupia. There's a lot of stuff. That's not my expertise, is more in pistols, but is most of your stuff, like, what's your longest range caliber for the really long range shooting stuff?
Would be my 300 Magnum.
Okay. Is there a reason you prefer that? Is that got the weight where at longer distance, wind gusts at different ranges don't disturb it as much? Because
it does. I use it with either a 190 or a 195 grain bullet, so it's a little bit more stable at those longer distances. And I've just never really made the jump yet to one of the 6.5s or something like that. And I might do that someday. I might try it out. When I went to the Bang Steel course and we were shooting out to 1,200 yards, I was doing that with just my standard. It was my old work rifle, my 308. And it was still accurate to those distances.
Wow.
And I really wouldn't have believed that until I went to that course, because I would have thought, probably 800, 900 yards, it's going to run out of gas. But I was able to successfully engage those targets out to 1,200 yards.
Wow, that's pretty impressive. Yeah, because I thought I was more like 800, 850, and then kind of I thought there's too much drop and too much coefficient drag, wind deflection kind of stuff going on. Real weight at that point.
Now you got to keep in mind, I'm an old school sniper. So when I was shooting at 1,200 yards, my scope didn't have sufficient elevation adjustment to be able to compensate for that. So I literally had it dialed all the way down for my full elevation. Plus I was holding up either 3.5 mil dots over and above that. And I had to compensate for wind. So the target was actually drifting over here in the lower right quadrant of the scope.
In the scope.
Yeah.
So you're basically being a mortar man at that point, lobbing them in. I don't know what our military. I think now, have we decided? Is it 6.8 SPC? So I think SIG got the contract at least for the medium lightish machine gun, and I think they got the contract now for 6.8. Is it? I don't want to say it's caseless. It's got a case, but it's a combination of metal and polymer or something. Do you know anything about?
I haven't heard anything about that.
We've been talking. I mean, they've been talking for a long time, especially because of Afghanistan. 5.56 really isn't reaching out and touch someone. The military went away from 7.62 because, quite frankly, it's heavy. You know, I mean, engagement distances in Iraq were like, you know, 100 yards typically, 150 yards. It wasn't very meters or whatever. It wasn't very far. But then we get out of Afghanistan and they're lobbing down AK rounds, but they're able to do it because they got elevation up in the mountains. So they're able to, typically an AK is, 250 meters maybe. It's not, there's a lot of bullet drop with the 7.62 by 39 cartridge. But if you're lobbing them down from the mountains, it's pretty good. So we needed to reach out 600, 700, 800, 900 meters, a lot more. And that's why a lot of the special forces would still get like scars and stuff in various platforms in 7.62. But I think they really have been pushing to go to like a 6.8, and there's been various ones. So I'm not too up on it. But I think we're finally eventually going to adopt an intermediate cartridge between the two and being some kind of 6.8. I don't know if the AR is going to go away from 5.56. I think it will be a slow roll. That will just be the like medium machine guns going to that first. But eventually, I mean, ARs can take a 6.8 upper. So I think eventually we'll be going in that direction.
I would imagine you're right. I mean, with the evolution of everything else through military firearms, I would imagine that after all of the trial and error and complaints there have been with the 5.56 cartridge over the years, that sooner or later they're going to adopt something in between. It's probably kind of surprising that hasn't been done at this point, either something in the 6.8 or 270 or something like that type of a range.
Okay, well, let's get to stuff I know more about. I'm just trying to wing it here. I mean, I kind of know. I kind of stay up on some of it. But let's start talking about different pistols and revolvers. I guess probably because you mentioned it earlier, and the platform you really learned on is an MP. Let's start with the good old 1911, something I'm starting to get to on my own channel. I'm known for martial arts, and I wish my firearms review videos were getting more love. And I might start a separate channel called Pure Reviews to just put that stuff, even if it's not monetized, just to see if eventually it'll get a different segment of society. I thought more martial artists would be into firearms because that is martial arts, as we both said. But it sadly maybe isn't the case. They believe in fantasy world where they're going to ninja, Seagal, Van Damme, a room full of terrorists or something. But let's start with the 1911. What are your thoughts on the 1911, and also what different companies? You've owned a bunch of them from a bunch of different manufacturers.
Yeah, I've got a, what is it now, 35-year relationship with the 1911 pistol, and I'm as much a fan of it today as I was the first time I ever fired one back on Paris Island in 1985. It's a tremendous pistol. For something to have been designed, what are we up to now? 110 years ago, 110 this year, and still be a viable platform for use for just about anything you want to use it for, whether it's defensive shooting, competitive shooting, whatever. It's just amazing to think that it's still a good option all these years later. It does have, not surprisingly, it's got some drawbacks to it today as compared to some others. It's heavy. It is a single action semi-auto, so somebody has to be able to manipulate the thumb safety as they're bringing it up to shoot and all that type of thing. But as far as just, putting bullets effectively on target, it does that just as well now as it did 110 years ago. So I can't say enough good things about them. I own, I don't know, probably more than I should be allowed to currently, from various
You lost them all in the accident, Howard. Because, they're going to go after the 911s in more than 10 rounds first, but then eventually they're coming for us all because they like to just chop away at the freedoms. And, it's just a little bit more. It's just a little bit more. They know how to do things in the psyche. The Russians and the communists did a lot of studies on that, and they're playing from those same very playbooks. 1911. Have you ever had problems? Do you think anyone, if they're trained that way to sweep off the safety, if they're trained to engage at least an extended beaver tail grip safety, have you ever had a problem where you haven't been able to get the grip safety to press, or where you've gone for a bang and it didn't go bang?
I have, and it's usually when I'm practicing, quick presentations, and I don't really have a good grip as I come up and I try to squeeze the trigger, and I have to make a quick adjustment. I have had that happen, but not often. And it seems to be a little bit more so with certain individual pistols than others. Nowadays, so many of them have that extended grip safety, the little memory bump that helps to make sure you've got that depressed, and that seems to more or less do away with that. Some of it has to do with your grip too, but I have experienced that, but not very often.
Yeah, I think basically if it's for something that you sometimes carry, I think that you should want that. I think that extended grip safety is a big thing, as opposed to packing a 1911 A1 kind of military pattern thing. And besides, the sights kind of suck on those old pistols. Quite, they do. They're nostalgic if you're really good at the 1911s, maybe. But I think for carry, I still think it's some kind of lightweight commander, or like my current gun I just reviewed. And guys, please go watch the videos on the unboxing. I need some more views, thumbs up, and comments on my the ATI FXH 45 hybrid. So it's a full-size 5-inch 1911 slide, but it's on a Palmer frame. And it actually feels really good. It has finger grooves that fit the hands really good. So it's a full size, but it's only 32.5 ounces. And people that haven't carried, well, what's 8 ounces? The difference between a 30 or 32 ounce pistol is doable with a good holster and a good gun belt versus 40 ounces, 42 ounces. Yes, you will absolutely feel it. I feel like 30, 32 ounces isn't really that big of a deal that people make it out to. Whether that's something like this FXH 45, 30 ounce like your Colt Lightweight Commander, and your Lightweight Commander versus Block 19 video you had that I liked, that's doable. A full size 40 ounce, is it really doable? Yeah, maybe like one day a year or a barbecue with a nice leather holster or something. But I think a Lightweight Commander or something in that 30 to 32 ounce, and which is also where the Beretta is 32.5 ounces, something like that, with a Beretta 92 or M9. I think that's still doable. Do you agree with me on that?
I do, and I've got a Smith & Wesson SW 1911 SC that has the scandium frame, so it's that same lightweight commander idea essentially, and that's a nice pistol to carry. In fact, I think it's below 30 ounces. It might be like 28 unloaded. Yeah,
and I'm really jealous now, because if you've seen the prices on them, it's kind of the ideal carry 1911, really. And prices now, we're looking at like $1,300, $1,400 now on those.
Yeah, I probably bought mine every day of 10 years ago. It might have been more like 12, and I think it was $700 back then.
Yeah, so I wish there was more stuff like that, but there is some good stuff. I'm impressed so far with this. Some people don't like the looks. I think it looks pretty futuristic, kind of old school, new school, badass. I've carried it a bit. I've got to decide if I want to switch over to the 1911 platform now that I didn't work, and with COVID-19 '84, I had to sell all my evil 9mm higher standardly good capacity firearms because the media and even the first person in some whitish house is saying they're wrong and they're evil and they're bad. So for money purposes, I had to get rid of all that kind of stuff. But maybe a 7-shot 357 Magnum or a 8+1 or even 10+1 1911 platform that's light enough to carry, I still think is a pretty viable option. This thing that I've been running, I tried 3 different hollow points. One was a plus P. So already, I think they're going to want it back, and they're not getting a lot of feedback coming back from the company. Going through a person right now to find out, like, is this something you want back, or is it something I can buy for cheaper, or what? Because I actually got night sight sent to me from Access. I wanted to put on a Belator One's night sight, but I don't know if I can mess with it. But it handled hollow points fine. And for the first break-in period, anyway, right away, it was handling steel case and hollow points. Guys, look at my full review. Please give it some likes and comments on the FXH 45. Glock in 1911 had a baby, budget baby videos. I'd appreciate it. But I also think I'm going to get Ruger to send me one of their lightweight commanders, which I think that's also a very good option. And I think if I trained with it and made okay 1911, I don't know if you still carry one sometimes. You've just handled the 1911 so much you think you'll know when you grip one that you're going to have the memory to disengage the thumb safety.
Yeah, I always when I talk about the 1911, I always describe that to people as my expert's firearm. That's the one for the person that's going to go out and just train and train and train and train with that particular platform, so that everything is just second nature with regard to it. And if somebody does that and they get to the point where everything is reflexive, then even if you haven't carried it for a little while and you come back to it, that's still going to be there. It's that muscle memory, just again, like any other martial art, like that technique that you've practiced over and over and over again, that's always there. Yeah.
I kind of hope that, if I change to it for a few weeks, as long as I practice like my draw 3 times before I go out of the house, kind of hoping that's ingrained. But I have to, the distractors, I have to admit, it's kind of like, I like to carry different stuff, or am I going to switch to this platform as I get older? I kind of have to decide, I think, like, am I going to, but I think 8+1 of 45 usually gets it done. And a 10-round Wilson Combat magazine, I think 11 rounds in most civilian, anyway, in most civilian defensive gun use, I think 11 rounds of 45 for most of them makes more sense as long as you are pretty skilled. Like we are, as long as your skill levels are not basic, you're not just going to the range twice a year, but you take it seriously. You're trying to shoot once a week, typically at least 3 times a month. I think 11 rounds of 45 or 9 rounds even of 45 make more sense than 13 or 15 rounds of 9mm. But that's just my opinion, looking at all the ballistic studies that I do and going crazy into it. Do you still sometimes throw on one of your lightweights, your Smith & Wesson SC? Do you still carry 1911 occasionally?
Yeah. Every once in a while, when the mood strikes me, I'll grab one, and that's what goes with me that day.
So in the military, you had the 1911. Did you ever carry a Beretta M9 or Beretta 92 on duty?
No, I saw some of them, and when the Marine Corps first started to acquire those things in 1985, they went to deployable units first, meaning essentially infantry units, and base personnel, which typically military police are among the last personnel to get new weapons as they come in like that. So I would see different times infantry Marines that would be in my area for one reason or another. Usually they were officers that were carrying a Beretta M9, but I was never issued one. When the last time that I qualified with a pistol in Iwakuni, Japan, which was shortly before I left, which would have been it was either late 1988 or very early 1989. The base there had just started to get the M9, and there were a couple of MPs. They were brand new. In fact, they might have trained on the M9 when they were at basic military police training. They were down at the end of the firing line shooting those, but I still was shooting in 1911. And then when I got recalled into the Marine Corps in 1991, once again, I was issued in 1911 when I went back to Marine Corps Air Station New River. So even as late as then, and in fact, we were still using M16A1s at that late date. So a lot of people, like to think that 1985 was a magic year where suddenly the entire Marine Corps had the Beretta M9 and the M16A2, and that's not the case. It took years and years and years to fully integrate those into the Marine Corps.
Yeah. M16A2 95, I can say in my own experience. What do you think of that platform? 92s, M9s, 96s.
I really like it. I've got a Beretta M9. It's the commercial M9, and I've had it for a few years now, and it's a very nice shooting pistol. It's got that Walther P38 operating system that really gives it a soft shooting characteristic, and it's extremely accurate, points well. It's kind of, and in fact, I used this description the other day when I was talking about the 92. It's sort of the Italian sports car of the handgun market. And nowadays it's the classic Italian sports car of the handgun market.
Yeah. Guys, I mean, for you martial art people, I mean, that aren't totally into firearms, we're talking the Beretta that's in Lethal Weapon and Die Hard and every cool John Woo dual wielding action you've ever seen. They look amazing. They shoot amazing. They are soft shooting. They're very accurate because the barrel's locked. The barrel's locked in place. It doesn't recoil. It's not the tilting block design. And I think it's still viable. I think they were very reliable. People that badmouth them maybe got experience in the military when they were beat to crap and they weren't following the regular maintenance schedules. And you do have jams if your recoil spring hasn't been changed in 50,000 rounds. The locking block is supposed to be changed, I think, every 5,000 rounds, but most of them could probably go like 15,000. But still, there's stuff that needed to be updated that really wasn't happening in the military. But I still think, it's a bit heavy, but it's still a great choice. Nowadays, to do it over, you could look at a 92X. I would recommend people for carry get the 92X Centurion, GR meaning decocker, G decocker. If you could have one, don't worry about the safety. Just get practicing decocker after you fire, and that way you do it in a defensive gun use. If you got to fire and decock, but they're on the ground and you got to arrest somebody and decock, so you're reholstering. I still think a DASA auto with the decocker only is, in the world of striker-fired guns, I still think that platform and platforms like it are still very good options. So props to Beretta, or 92A1s have the trigger guard like the 92Xs, look really nice with the curved trigger guard. I think that looks even prettier. But I think it's still a good platform, though they were beat up and neglected. So you do have a 1911 versus Beretta or M9 video, guys should check out. And now you just got your hold of the new pistol, the SIG M18, which is basically a P320 with an external safety put on it. What are your opinions on the SIG?
That one, I have to say, was courtesy of my lovely wife. She got that for me for my birthday this year. And it's just a tremendous pistol. I'm really impressed with it. I don't have a lot of rounds through mine yet, but the shooting that I've done with it, it's reliable. It puts bullets where I point it. It's a good feeling pistol. I think the Marine Corps is going to be pretty happy with it. And I've seen, and I've gotten a few comments from people that don't seem to be quite as enthusiastic about it as I am. But I think for a general issue pistol, it's going to do real well.
Yeah. I mean, I've shot a bunch of 320s. I haven't shot the M18. M17 is the 5-inch P320 with an external safety, basically slightly different sights, guys. I don't know if they're all coming optics plate. Is yours optics plate ready?
Yeah.
Are they all optics plate ready?
Yeah.
No, I mean, the military knows, like, in the future with special operations, we might pay extra for those guys to have red dots, which is, good forward thinking on them. And the M17 is a 5-inch version. M18 is basically a 320 compact or carry version with a 3.9-inch barrel. And you're probably right. The Marine Corps probably made a good decision by just picking the slightly lighter weight, smaller version. And that way, if they ever have to do things like concealed or special operations, you already got it. I mean, with a compact pistol, you can basically make long-range accuracy with a pistol, almost just as well as with a 5-inch slide. I think that's probably just economically was the smarter decision. But I think a 320 is a good platform. I really do. They had some problems, I think, originally, only because SIG suddenly went in, let's say, making 5,000 units a month to making 55,000 units a month. So I think originally there was a couple of like double feed issues and some weird stuff that was going on originally, but hopefully they got those squared away. And I think, as I mentioned earlier, I think SIG got the contract for the machine guns. So, they are the weapons provider now because they make their own ammo, they make their own suppressors or silencers. And yes, you can call them that because that's what Maxim called it in his patent. Another one of my pet peeves when guys online like, it's not a silencer, it's a suppressor. Well, really? What did the designer call it? And all that. So quality control's gone a little bit down with SIG, but hopefully yours turns out well, and I think it's a good platform. The only dislike I think you said in your video was there really wasn't somewhere to put your thumb. Which, guys, it's 2021, and that's why I got on Glock a lot. Like, things should have grip texture. Things should have a accelerator. Even the G3C, G2C, G3 has a little cutout to put your hole, like to put your thumb, to hold recoil control, which especially for a beginner, like, they'll just do that naturally. Like, there's no reason that a pistol now shouldn't have good ergonomics, stippling in the grip. Like, if we're talking a Palmer frame pistol, like, it's not hard to make your mold so it has all those things. Like, that's what should be happening. Glock, where's it Gen 6 that actually like changes some things? That would be great. I guess I'm not getting love from Smyrna, Georgia anytime soon. But so the SIG. Let's talk about the Masada as well, and that you've changed over to red dots. So let's mention that. We haven't done any revolver talk, so then we'll backtrack our way to old-fashioned steering wheel on bolt technology.
Okay, and were you asking about the Masada then, or the wheel guns?
Yeah, let's go to the Masada, just because I want to go to that, and then your take on red dots, and you went to the M&P and red dots, and I don't know, I mean, basically any striker fighter 9mm gun, especially right now, should be coming basically optics plate red dot. Red. I mean, that's the wave of the future.
That's exactly what I was going to say. I think that's the wave of the future. And the reason I did that, and I don't know if you saw the videos that I made a couple of years ago with my M&P when I switched over and put the Loophole Delta Point Pro on there. But at my current age, I'm getting to the point where my eyes are losing a little bit of acuity, and particularly the front sight as I'm aiming a pistol is starting to get a little bit fuzzy for me. So I opted to go the red dot route, and it was an experiment really to begin with to see, is this thing going to be something that I think is going to be viable for a duty platform, either for law enforcement or for the military. And I carried that for the last couple of years that I worked for the police department. And I have to say that it always worked well. The DPP held a 0. always kind of like Barney Fife. I always kept a spare battery in my pocket, but I would replace those things, periodically, so that I never had a battery issue or anything else. I never had problems with it, with rain being on there or snow or anything. Occasionally, I would take a lens cloth and just clean off the lens to make sure that I didn't have a buildup of anything on there that was going to cause a problem. But it worked well for me during the time that I used it.
Let me ask you a question about that. You just use a cloth on the inside and outside, and ground. Did you ever have to spray it with anything or anything like that?
Plain old lens cloth is the only thing I ever used on it.
I was just curious about that. And I think for law enforcement and military, do I think it's needed for a concealed carrier? No. Do you think it's needed? Everyone has to switch to a red dot for concealed carry?
No, and I really don't. If somebody has that desire, it's going to add some bulk to their concealed pistol that they're going to have to account for. But do I think they have to have that? No, not at all. For me or for people in law enforcement, for people in the military, and some of the scenarios you might be in, particularly where you might have to take a longer range shot, or there might be some other things going on, that ability to have that dot and be able to focus on it. And particularly the thing that I like about the Delta Point Pro, and mine's one of the older ones, I don't think they make these anymore, but it's got the actual Delta style reticle. So it's a triangle. Mm-hmm. And the way I have it zeroed, the very tip of the triangle at 20 yards is where that bullet's going to strike. So if I need to make a very precise shot, I can do it with the very tip of that triangle. Otherwise, I bring it up and I've got a 7 minute of angle triangle that I can just superimpose on the target and squeeze off shots. So it gives me the ability to fire both fast shots and, if necessary, an accurate shot. And I like that capability. It's the same as you have with iron sights, but I'm able to do that now even with my eyes, unassisted from glasses or whatever else if I'm working.
Yeah, I think I agree. I think law enforcement and military has more of a chance for extreme long range shots. Definitely. I mean, we've seen a lot lately on active self-protection. A lot of these law enforcement officers only qualify out to 25 yards. And yet here we are making a 42-yard shot, stuff like that. It happens way more law enforcement than an extreme outlier with a civilian. Right. Though it can happen with civilians too. In fact, in 2012, I think in Texas, a guy came to a rescue of a law enforcement officer. I don't know the exact what was happening, but I think he made a 72-yard shot with his Colt Python. I don't know if the guy was stabbing, shooting, or punching on top of a cop or what, but I think he made a 72-yard shot, like Walking Dead style. I wonder if he caught. I wonder if it was made single action. I assume it's an old timer, but who knows? So it can happen. It does happen, and you should work on long range shooting as well. But military and law enforcement do have a different scenarios they have to deal with. And long range precision and hostage, rescue. I think that can come into play, and I think that's smart of our military going to an optics plate ready pistol where they ain't gonna give everyone an optic right away. It's kind of like getting optics on M4s has started to happen more and more. It trickles down, but I'm sure our special forces can get an optic on their pistol if that's what they desire. And for the stuff they're doing, it might make a lot of sense. My experience has been pretty limited, but I did play and do a review on the Holosun 507C, but the newest one that has the ACSS reticle. So it does have a reticle chevron like this, where you can get fine precision on the tip. I mean, there is a little probably 1 point. It's kind of like an AR. You get a little bit of a holdover, like an AR is typically 1.7 inches, I think, to your red dot. Kind of on the pistol, it's the same thing. But I played with it, and I found that for CQB, you can put the bottom of the chevron, boom, and it's going to be dead there on the T-box. So it made super accurate headshots very, very easy. And, 15 yards out, you can go to the point, make fine, especially for headshots, much, much, much easier. In long range, your bullet drop for 9mm or 45 or 40, like it's different, but at like 100 yards, you just go at the bottom of the chevron, so it sounds similar to what you had on the Delta Point Pro. I think that's something like that sounds superior even than just the regular red dot that most of them are out there. But I think they're all going to be switching in the future to not just that size, but to the micro size. Hopefully they can get something like that in on the micro red dots that fit like the Hellcat, the P365, stuff in the eventually the Smith & Wesson Shield Plus, the Ruger Max 9, eventually probably the GX4, some of the micros. But I think the technology is interesting, and I think it's good. Though my friend did say his battery died. It's supposed to last like 2 years, and his battery died like twice before 2 months. So I don't know. Guys out there, if you got any red dots, I'll take a question on red dots now if you got it. I do see you guys in the comment section. We will get to you on different stuff that I'll ask them about. But if anyone has any red dot experience or questions now, I can throw that up before we kind of change topic. But I don't think it's necessary. I think it can help an old timer as the eyes start to go. But I don't think it's necessary for concealed carry. Also, I'm a big fan of Access Big Dots and the R3D that I've looked at. The R3D, a bright orange, and it's convex. So having them, I think instead of like 3 green red dot night sights, I think now I'm the biggest proponent of having a big, bright orange front or a big dot if your eyes are that bad, and even maybe a black serrated rear. Because your visual field, the more I've learned from guys like Sage Dynamics, watching their channel, kind of a big, bright night sight, front night sight, I think is important for concealed carry, like that's on the Hellcat, something like that, that really pops out to you because you don't need your visual field. Especially civilian gun use, it's usually 7 yards and in, often at 5 yards or 3 yards. It is kind of the point shooting thing, like your newest video. It's very up close and personal, typically, and you don't really need fine rear sight being in your visual field. I don't think you need like 3 white dots. I think that's a really bad system, even if we're talking white dots. I think SIG had it correct in car long ago with like a white bar, a dot the eye kind of situation just for body alignment. So you're shooting more towards the spine than like precision shooting, something like that. I don't know. Do you kind of agree with that sentiment that just something on the front sight is most important?
Well, like you said, that's essentially what's on the Hellcat, and I really, really like that sighting system. I guess there are some people that don't care for it, but whenever I bring that up, that big, bright front sight just jumps out at me, whether it's low light or daytime, and it's just so easy to pick that up, place it on the target. It's almost like using a red dot. So I really like that sighting system. I've got the big dot sights on one of my other pistols. I like that as well. Just that high visibility sight that you can come up, and the front sight is so important to get that flash sight picture in a defensive situation where you're just coming up, and like you said, it's not a real precise shot. Typically, you just need to get shots on target precise enough. And for those kind of scenarios, I really like that type of high visibility sight.
Yeah. So guys, if you're not familiar with the Hellcat, it's got that big front, nice orange front sight, but it has a U-notch rear. Kind of has a smiley face thing that not everyone likes. I tend to like U-notch rear sights better than blocky ones. So if it does have this, like the FN pistols do, I think for a combat sight, quick, like real thing, I think that's much better if it happens to be in that shape of a U versus just rear blocks. But any gun manufacturers out there, if you're marketing a gun for concealed carry, just streamline the whole thing. Make them all come with a front night sight, because rears are too expensive. Just make a black serrated rear. That's what most, I think, more advanced people want, is they don't want the distraction in the visual field, and the rear is too close to your eyes. So that's why a red dot, Sage Dynamics, is more threat focused. You just put the dot. You need to be threat focused. You need to be focused on the front sight. You don't really need to be on a pistol too focused on the rear sights, typically, unless you're making a 100-yard extreme outlier shot, So it would be nice if people paid attention to that, because now even the Smith & Wesson Shield Plus, great pistol. I did a review at a range rental. Government, I don't own my guns. They're T&Es and they get sent back, or the range rentals are friends often. But I don't even know if any night sight versions have hit the market yet. I've been pumping so many out. I think it's just white dot. I don't know. I know a few of the 4-inch Performance Center ones that come with the green fiber optic front, which I like, but I hate orange fiber optic. That's like bling in my visual field in the rear. Like, I like the front, but the rears are like, whoa, that's too much going on. I don't think any night sight. I don't even know if any night sight. And I don't even like in the SIGs and the Smith & Wesson, the manufacturers usually do the same size 3 green night sights. You need that front dot to be bigger than the rears. And honestly, 3 white dots of all the same size, that's not what should be on a pistol, in my opinion. I just think that's like not awesome. On the MMPs, I think you got that. On the Masada, I think you got that kind of 3-dot sight system. I just, especially if the dots are all the same size, I just not a fan of. I don't think that's what belongs on a pistol at all. We'll come back. Let's come back to pistols, because we got a lot more to cover. Old Smith & Wesson 3rd gens and stuff like that. You mentioned the Hellcat. You mentioned the Masada. So let's finish up there. Do you like the Masada still as a good?
I do. It's
$175. I think it's a good value for the money. It's optics ready.
Yeah, you get a lot of pistol for the price with the Masada, and like you said, optics ready platform, very reliable, decent trigger, low maintenance, all the advantages of the polymer frame platforms, and they're coming in at less than $500. I think they're in the 480, somewhere in that neighborhood.
Yeah, I've seen them about 475, and I think I would like to shoot them. I've held them a couple times. And guys, if you're looking for a budget pistol, I think the IWI Masada is probably, though it's big, it's kind of big. It's a little, not that heavy, like 25, 26 ounces, but it has a 17-round grip frame. So have you concealed carried that?
I'm sure I have.
Kind of more like duty pistol. So it's a little big maybe for some people to conceal carry, but if you're looking for a home defense pistol or something, guys, on a budget, I think that's a getting overlooked. I think the Masada is probably a very good option. I myself have multiple reviews on the Eric's Delta, the Delta Gen 2. I think the Eric's Delta, and the price just dropped on the Gen 2s. I've seen them as low as $410 now. They were $550-ish. I think it's an amazing pistol for the money, the Eric's Deltas. So please look at my review videos of that. Look at HR's video on the Masada. So if you're looking for budget pistols, a lot of people are nowadays, or to recommend to family members, I think either one of those is the way to go. Just make sure it's optics ready model. I think that helps with resale value. If you guys spend $10 extra to get optics plate, guys, do it, because that's the way for the future, and that's definitely going to help you if you are in a state you can legally trade with people and stuff like that. That's going to help your trades out and your resale value out. What about the Hellcat? You're a big believer in the Hellcat. You carry that probably most often nowadays, don't you?
That's my most carried semi-auto pistol for off-duty purposes or CCW purposes. Now, probably my most carried firearm period is my Smith & Wesson 342, which is a alloy frame, titanium cylinder, J-frame Centennial revolver, because that thing is just so easy. If I'm going to the store, or I'm going, running here or running there, just drop that thing in my pocket and I'm off and running. But the Hellcat is definitely my most carried semi-auto for those purposes, and particularly when we get into the cooler weather and I'm wearing something, vest, jacket, whatever, and I have that in a belt holster, and it just disappears. In fact, I've got a DeSantis cross draw holster that I did a review on several months ago, And that particular combination is so comfortable. It is so accessible. It's just an extremely nice way to carry that pistol. The pistol itself is unobtrusive. It's small, and it shoots phenomenally for such a small pistol, which, again, in the video that I had that went live yesterday, I was out doing the point shooting with it, and it just performed very, very well.
Yeah, I've watched half of it. I didn't have time this morning before we went live to finish the second half. So I'm curious to see your point shooting videos, which the first one was great with bigger size, and now your recent one with the Hellcat versus a J-frame, at a 9mm J-frame. So, I think people should pay attention to those videos, guys. And I also have a proprioception point shooting video I did with a G3C before I ever fired it. The tour sent me to test and evaluate, and they get them back, government, with laser cartridge. So I do it on photorealistic targets, and you can see that I can hip shoot and Bill Jordan step out and bend elbow in different positions. For the point shooting, I've always called this shoulder extension. And if I bring it up a little bit more, but I'm not really looking at the sides, I think other people have called that the flashlight picture, but I call that slide focus, because I kind of just using the slide as a reference, like almost like you would a double-barreled or single-barreled shotgun. I'm just using the barrel as a point. It's really what your eyes are doing. Your brain kind of knows to focus, like, okay, I got this long thing pointed that's straight towards the target. Your brain kind of does that automatically. So I think those are all good point shooting positions, though I'm also a big fan of what I call the modified car position. And guys at SWAT school were using it all the time, and you have to with the shield. They weren't using that name, but they were like teaching this. But in reality, when we're in a house, your arms are getting fatigued doing a SWAT. So everybody was doing this because structurally it makes sense. And even when we did the crazy barrel drill with guys walking in front of you and crossing each other and stuff, really intense stuff, I said, hey, when I break right, though, I'm going to shoot like this. And he's like, huh? I said, I'm going to shoot like this. I said, okay, as long as you're making your hits. And I was making my hits. So people don't understand why I'm doing that in my videos. But especially if you got a house you got to clear or a hallway with doors on both sides, you don't know where a bad guy, you want your visual field to be looking for the guy. I think that's a really good position. So I don't know what you think about that. It looks a little Hollywoodish, but there's also the point of point shooting is like, maybe you don't want to be at full extension. Like at 4 yards and in, do you really want to be extending that out towards a bad guy that's charging you with a knife? I think at 5 yards, you're okay to fully extend, but like within 5 yards, it maybe should be a compressed ready or the modified car position, or 2 yards and in, maybe just a belt elbow or Bill Jordan type point shooting position. What do you think about different positions based on distance to your attacker?
So much of it depends on the circumstances that the person is in. What type of things they have around them. Are there barriers between them and the bad guy? Pieces of furniture or whatever. But if we're speaking just in generalities, yeah, if you're in arm's reach, the idea of bringing a firearm all the way out to full extension, you're essentially going to be making a contact shot. And then you run the risk of, potentially, getting into a fight over that firearm or whatever. Whereas if you're firing from a retention position that's farther back or closer to your body, you don't have quite as much concern for that. Obviously, like you said, as the distance gets greater and greater, then you're going to be better off coming up in those higher firing positions. Yeah.
Let me go to a couple people now, and got someone joining in. I'll ban you if you start. I don't know who you're saying's arm would break with a 45, but you're obviously a child or a troll, because neither of our arms break shooting 45, and we both handle recoil really well because we're actually really trained, not just playing Call of Duty. We got one old timer that says he's had a couple Holosun 510s. And yeah, I understand the battery life is supposed to last 2 years on the Holosun if you set it, program it. But I think some of them, maybe the programming, I don't know. My friends had it programmed for shake awake and should last that long, and they died a little bit. So that makes me a little hesitant about red dots, especially because often it's hard to find or get an answer, or if anyone makes it, the proper suppressor sight heights to co-witness a lower 1/3 co-witness. So I thought the technology was there, that you don't need to worry about it as long as, like HR said, he carries an extra battery, or you change it. Everyone says maybe just change it every birthday. I don't know. I thought it was there, but maybe it's not there yet, that you need co-witness sights. On your duty gun, did you have co-witness sights, suppressor sight heights?
No, on the M&P, you couldn't, because of the height of the back of the Delta Point Pro, you couldn't co-witness the sights. So I actually bought an auxiliary sight that fits the rear of the Delta Point Pro that gives you that ability. So I found a workaround for it, but I couldn't actually do a co-witness with the factory sights. They weren't high enough.
Yeah, I don't even think the rear is really important, but I think you kind of do want the front sight to be high enough to see in your window on the lower 1/3. Because at least if your battery happened to die on you, or it broke or flitzed out, I mean, I guess as long as you check every morning before you go on duty or before you go out concealed carrying. I always am a proponent, safety. I mean, you should have good trigger discipline, but if you carry every day, like I'm going to draw 3 times before I go out of the house. I think that muscle memory is good practice anyway as a martial artist, as a potential gunfighter. And I think it's good to check your gear anyway. For duty, I don't know. Should you have some kind of backup sights? Probably for duty. As a concealed carrier, I don't know. I still kind of worried about battery life. You never had that issue, though, as long as you checked it each day, or did you change it your birthday every year, every 6 months? Or
I changed about every 6 months.
Okay.
And, I would keep an eye on it, and like you said, check it every morning, make sure everything looked good, and then just to be safe, about every 6 months, I would check that, or I would change that battery out.
Okay, Sweet Dreams is thinking you sold them on a Hellcat. And guys, I honestly, some people say that a lot of the YouTubers are saying a Hellcat's really snappy compared to the other micros. So I do have a very popular video, the 5 micro pistols. The Taurus GX4 wasn't out yet. So based on weight and width, I did put the Delta in there, and maybe RX Delta will come out with a micro at some point. That'd be great. 12-round mags are already available due to the P10S. So really all they got to do is a chop job, like you're doing a 50 Mercury in Cobra or something. But I didn't find that. I was the very first YouTuber to compare a Hellcat to a 365. Honestly, I was the very first YouTuber, and I like the Hellcat better. I think it's because I have XL hands, and even a P365 or XL, like I think they're great weapons. The XL will probably be a great carry gun, but it's like too thin. If I don't get a proper grip, it can be a little off in the web of my hand, which means on a draw, I'd be pointing off a little bit. So the Hellcat just kind of fit a little bit better in my hand. I don't know. Do you find the Hellcat to be too snappy? Do you find it fits your hand?
No, I've heard and read that same criticism, and like you said, I'm not particularly recoil sensitive to begin with. You know, I shoot pistols, they recoil, and I don't give it a lot of thought. I just kind of go on with life. So, I mean, if somebody finds it to be, you know, uncontrollable for them, or they don't care for it, then, you know, obviously they might want to look at a different pistol, 365 or whatever. But I don't find the Hellcat to be too snappy.
Yeah, and I think the GX4 is worth a good look. Some people are reporting some trigger problems. Hopefully Taurus will work that out. I'd like to test and evaluate the GX4. I was so impressed with the G3C. Honestly, guys, the G3 is like the most naturally pointing pistol for me. It just points. I couldn't miss with it. I mean, I did that video and I never even fired the gun, and I can be upside down or whatever, and it just points for me. Great. I think it has great ergos. For a cheap pistol, I've been really impressed with the Taurus G3C. GX4, like I said, some people are reporting some I like how that fits in my hand better than I think a couple of the other micros. I like the looks of it. There maybe are some early teething issues. P365 had early issues too. A lot of micro guns. I mean, we're getting into like crazy going to outer space stuff now. I mean, we're microsizing 11, 13 plus one guns now that are like super tiny. I mean, I pocket carried the Hellcat in my jeans, 13 plus one, no problem in my Ranger gear. Sweet Dream says, yeah, barrel pointing like a shotgun. You got a lot of problem rabbit hunting, right? I mean, your eyes know. You don't got to necessarily focus on the bead or anything. If you're looking down the barrel, that's why I called that slide focus. If you're at close range or even swinging a shotgun, like, I don't know, point shooting to me, maybe it's the martial arts, proprioception. I know where my spine and my belly button is. I think you can do more point shooting than a lot of people think you can do. I haven't watched the end of your video yet, so I got to see, but it sounds like the Hellcat must have made it to pretty far yards. Do you want to give us a teaser there? Did the Hellcat?
Let me put it this way. It surprised me.
Okay. So I got to finish watching that today. Guys, I think anything on point shooting is important too. I don't think it's one or the other. And you get online and forums, people are like Call of Duty that don't really shoot. Like, it's not one or the other. It's not just Israeli method. And you do what you do based on the circumstances. Do you agree with that?
I absolutely agree with that. Yeah.
And on SWAT and a search, a guy might be way down there at the end of the hallway, or he may be here surprising you hiding under blankets, right? Let's see if there's any really here. So yeah, guys, I think the Hellcat. I might get Ruger to send me, besides the lightweight Commander. In the future, I might get them to send me the Max 9 Pro. So I will hopefully get some trigger time on a Max 9 Pro, a GX4. I've already had quite a few times on P365 and XLs. It's just like a little too thin for me. I do like the Hellcat. People do report the Hellcat's a little bit more snappy. So if it's for your wife, girlfriend, or someone untrained, maybe. But if you're trained and aren't recoil sensitive, I think the Hellcat's a great option. Maybe we'll just save wheel guns for last. The people, the diehards that want to hear about wheel guns. We've already talked about the M9 Beretta. We've talked about some full-size options and optics-ready options. Guys, I think the IWI Masada and the ARX Delta Gen 2 are great under $500 options right now that you could still get at gun deals. If you look for gun deals on gun deals, you could probably figure out what I'm talking about. Let's see. Okay, so what about Smith? You're big on Smith third gens. In fact, I think that's how I found your channel, was on old Smith & Wesson third gen Chief Special or something like that. We both have videos on you with the 9mm version. My old friend had the CS45. Great little pistols, little chunky. I'm not sure if I really love the rubber grip, but overall, I think third gens, I could have gotten one cheap, a 6906 cheap, right before Takeover 84 happened. I wish I would have gotten one really cheap from AIM Surplus was going to give me like a discount to put it on the channel. And I didn't get one. I regret it so much now. The 6906 is the lightweight 12-round version of the like 5906 and stuff, so the alloy frame versions. Talk about the old Smith & Wesson autos.
My interest in those started in a tent in Korea. I was sitting over there and I had a couple of old, now I say old, they were several months old, gun magazines. That was the only thing I had to read while I was sitting there doing nothing. And there were advertisements in there and there were articles. Like I said, this was 88 or very early 88 was when these magazines had been published. talking about this new third generation of Smith & Wesson pistols that were coming out. And they talked about, kind of the evolution of the pistols and everything else. And I thought, wow, that's pretty cool. And of course, at that time, the 15-shot 9mm semi-auto was rapidly becoming the darling of both gun writers and law enforcement officers and whoever else. So when I got out of the Marine Corps and I was hired by my first police department, we had to purchase our own pistols. They didn't issue pistols. So I went to a store that actually still exists and started looking at what they had, and I couldn't afford, I was looking at the third generation pistol specifically. I couldn't afford a 5906. The all stainless pistol was a little more expensive than the blued 5904. So I ended up buying a 5904, 9mm 15-shot. Actually, the very first ones were 14-shot still. So I got one of those, and that's the pistol that went with me to the police academy. And just a great pistol, accurate, reliable. I carried that thing, and not just at the academy, but I shot the heck out of that over the next several months. And a year or so later, Smith & Wesson came out with the 4006. Well, by then I was making a little bit more money. Not like a fool, I traded my 5904 on the 4006. But I carried that then for a period of time. Again, great pistol.
Well, all law enforcement had to go to 40 cal now.
Yep. And I was I was either the first or second. I don't know which one of us bought ours first, but either the first or second police officer in my county at the time to have a pistol chambered for the 40. And this would have been 1990, early 1990. Or no, fall of 1990. I take that back. But I had the 4006, and other than being a little bit heavy, but it's on a duty belt with a holster, so the weight wasn't quite so much of a concern. Plus, I was whatever at that time, 21. So who cares how heavy it is?
Future back issues.
So anyway, that was a great pistol. So I got to when I switched police departments again, got to the new department. Well, shortly after I got there, they purchased and issued a 59 series Smith & Wesson, but it was one of the double action only. It was 5943. That's the pistol that I used when I went to firearms instructor training. Then I went to armorers training. I became an armorer for that pistol. And I just have such a familiarity with those pistols. And over the course of that time, I learned the history of the pistols going back to shortly after World War II, when the military was looking at making a switch from the 9mm pistols. And that's when Smith & Wesson developed them. And I've just always found them to be really good pistols. They never had quite the sex appeal of the Berettas or the SIGs or some of the other ones that also cost more back in the day. But I always found them, for the price, to be very, very good pistols.
They're pretty ridiculously reliable. All of them could function with all kinds of ammo. I mean, I've heard the 45s will even cycle empty brass.
I've heard that. I've never tried it with my 745, but I've heard that.
Yeah.
But yeah, and like I said, I never felt like they quite had the same level of I hate to say respect, but it's the only word that comes to mind, that some of the other brands had with the semi-autos from back in the day. But they always worked extremely well for me, and I just always had an affinity for them, and still do. And nowadays I have quite a few of the third gens. I wish Smith & Wesson would bring them back in some sort of a classic line, but thus far they've not done anything like that. So those of us that like those pistols are kind of relegated to going through the gun shows and looking at the used gun counters and hoping we come across something good from time to time.
Yeah, and you can find police trade-ins. I've been asking a lot for them lately. A year and a half ago, you were able to get some of the police trade-ins pretty cheap on websites in states where you can trade them. I've seen, unfortunately, people are marking these $300 police trade-ins up to $600 now, trying to get stuff. But they're tanks. If you just want a range thing, like a 5906, 40 ounces, but you want to teach someone how to shoot, there's no recoil of 9mm in a 40-ounce pistol versus a 22-ounce pistol, a lot of them. So I still think they're great pistols. You saw them in a lot of movies and TV shows. And I think even Chuck, a TV show I did stunts on, had a lot of different third-gen autos in it. Of course, you got Denzel Washington with the two bad boy 4506s, dual shoulder holster in the movie, and Vic Mackey also had a 4506. Because LAPD for a while had the 4506. Mm-hmm. And of course, the 40 cals were used by a lot of state troopers. Highway Patrol had the 4006, and 40 is kind of getting a bad rap. And I was even giving 40 a bad rap, and then I shot a 40 a couple weeks ago. I shot my old friends last time, getting together with him on his 77th birthday. 650, he spent 50 years to the day as a cop in law enforcement. I shot his USP 40, and I shot that thing fast. I blitzed away. So I don't know. Maybe everyone's gone away from 40 now, but maybe law enforcement was right to go to 40. It did offer kind of the best of bullet mass to get good penetration. A bigger diameter causes faster blood loss. No matter what you say, people, it causes faster blood loss, which means faster. Maybe they stop trying to kill you from diastolic pressure loss. They get dizzy and woozy earlier, and it had a good middle ground of capacity. What do you think about the 40? Do you think 40 was wrong, or do you think 40 is getting a bad rep nowadays?
I think it's getting a little bit of a bad rap. People have been jumping off the 40 and onto the 9mm bandwagon now for a few years. I mean, I carried a 40 Smith & Wesson for, let's see, probably 12 years, 14 years, something like that. And then I went back to it again toward the end of my time with the police department when I put the loophole, the DPP on my duty gun. And I certainly don't feel that it's an inferior cartridge. It's definitely a capable cartridge. It has been used multiple times successfully for many, many years. It does generate a little bit more recoil than the 9mm pistol, and generally the same size pistol will have a few less rounds in the magazine for the 40 Smith & Wesson than it will for a 9mm. But as far as just being an effective cartridge, it's absolutely an effective cartridge. There's no problem with it.
Yeah, I think even some of the junkier hollow points work at 180 grains, and from what I look at, it seems like 180 grain HST is awesome, but 165 gold dot, 165 grain HST, kind of, you look at ballistic wise as far as velocity and weight and everything, 165 grain probably is where that cartridge, even though it was designed around 180, 165 seems like a beautiful sweet spot if you looked at deep penetration, expansion, and all that kind of stuff in various testers. Even my friend Gunsam now just picked up a 40 for the first time. You got identical M&P 5 inches, 2.0, one in the 9mm, one in the 40. So now he's done 40 testing, and you can compare it directly with 9mm and 45 and the same bullets, whether it's critical duty or HST or whatever. So that's interesting. I'm starting to go, maybe, because the recoil is kind of worse than a 45 in my opinion. I think the lump of a 45, most people, the felt recoil seems to be even kind of less or more controllable or more straight up and down than kind of torquey, jerky than the 40 is. But then when I shot, I blasted away this guy's 40 USP the other day, and that might be the USP can really handle the cartridge and was designed around it versus 9mm like Glocks that were just jacked up to a 40 that weren't really designed to it. The SIG 239 and USP were designed around the 40. So maybe it kind of matters if it was designed around the 40 or if it was a big metal gun, heavier gun that could handle it. But yeah, maybe the 40 got a bad rap lately. Maybe people shouldn't have thrown away all their 40s. I'm kind of worried it's going to make the price go up. But for a while here, when things were crazy and you couldn't get 9mm, it was easier and cheaper to get 40.
Yeah.
So, are there any other pistols you want to mention before we start talking revolver talk?
I think we've covered a lot of them. We've covered a lot of ground there, so I think we're good on pistols.
So, what was your first revolver then?
The first one was a 22 single action Colt, a Colt Frontier Scout that I still have. That was the very first one. My first serious revolver was a Smith & Wesson Model 60 that I got for off-duty and backup with my first police department all the way back in 1990. That one I actually gave to my dad. He's got that these days. And, since that time, and again, this goes a lot back to my childhood. The Smith & Wesson revolvers on TV and in the movies and everything else were just, everywhere. And, in the magazines, you'd read the articles from people like Elmer Keith, or you'd read something from Bill Jordan or whoever talking about, the Model 29 or the Model 19 or the Model 15 or whatever, Model 27, 28. And I started shooting those. The Model 60, it wasn't too long after that till I got the 3-inch Model 66 that I've had in a couple of videos and just gone up and up and up from there. I've actually sold off a few of my Smith & Wesson revolvers here in recent years, but I've still got quite a few of them. I'm a big fan of the Combat Magnums, the Model 19, the Model 66. Big fan of the 44 Magnums. I've got quite a few of those. And again, it's another one of these things where I found them to be, accurate, reliable. If I need to do some work on them, easy to work on. They're not particularly finicky about anything. They just work well for me. They have a tremendous history. I'm a huge history buff, so that probably plays part of it too. Just found them to be very good revolvers for what I use them for.
Did you actually carry a revolver on duty? Because the way you do your reloads with you're quick on your reloads with speed loaders. To answer that truthfully, I have carried one on duty, but it's just been one of these times, like when I was chief, if I felt like carrying a revolver that day, I would carry a revolver that day. But my issued firearm was always one version or another of a semi-auto. And most of the law enforcement officers that carried a backup, it usually was a Smith & Wesson 38. Right?
Right. And I went to revolver instructor training years ago because I had to be able to teach police officers who were still carrying revolvers or carrying revolvers for off-duty and backup use or whatever. So, I did a lot of training with revolvers. I've done a lot of shooting of revolvers, but as far as actually carrying them on duty, not too often.
When you were a law enforcement officer, did you carry inside your vest or ankle kit backup or in a pocket, or where would you carry it typically?
For a backup, I carried them all kinds of different places. I tried a lot of different things. I used an ankle holster for a long time, but the only thing I didn't like about that is if I'm fighting with somebody up here, I didn't want to have to go all the way to my ankle for a backup firearm if I needed it. I carried one a lot of times in my offside pocket of my duty pants with the idea that if somebody was trying to snatch my duty pistol, I could lock that down and still access the pistol from my off pocket. In the wintertime, I would carry a second pistol in a shoulder holster underneath a winter coat. A variety of different ways that I tried to see what was going to work best for me.
Yeah, I'm a big proponent of offside front pocket carry for a lot of reasons. For a weapon retention reason, you can lock it down like you said. I think that's a great big reason for, you got your sketchy meters going off, but it's not time to pull a pistol. Hey, I don't have to brandish. No one needs to know. It's in a pocket holster. It's safe. The trigger guard's covered. I'm just grabbing the grip of that pistol or revolver. I think that's very good. I think a lot of guys nowadays are starting to find out, hopefully there's some good quality Kydex holsters to carry on the inside of the vest. Mm-hmm. And as long as there's good quality trigger guard coverage, I think that's, maybe even better than the J-frames nowadays is the micro compact like a Hellcat or 365, as long as it has a good, very locked in Kydex type holster to cover that trigger guard. So that's good. So you still a lot of times carry that little 342 J frame because it's lightweight?
I do, yeah. And like I said, that's just so easy to grab and go. It's compact, it's lightweight. I don't even think about it, other than if I put my hand in my pocket, it's right there.
Yeah. So when you pocket carry, is usually J from the Hellcat, are you usually carrying either cross draw or on your hip?
Yeah, the Hellcat I tend to carry in a holster of some type or another, usually an outside the waistband holster or maybe a shoulder holster. That's what I said. Typically, when it gets a little cooler and I'm wearing some sort of a garment over top of just my regular shirt, that's when I normally have the Hellcat.
Which matters. I tend to live in warmer states nowadays because I don't want to deal with it. But when I started, I was carrying a few years ago, I was in Oregon, it's pretty frigid. So, it's different then. I've switched to appendix carry the last year and a half. But in the colder weather, I do like 3 o'clock outside waistband because you carry your jacket unzipped. You can throw that open or a vest or whatever. Though, I do think I'm going to do my first IDPA this upcoming Saturday.
Good.
Which means I can't appendix carry because they don't want to update themselves to being smart. But I do have my old man vest. I had that video on the Shoot Me First vest. Maybe that's what it's for. Maybe I'll have to figure out what I'm going to use and compete with and holster and all that. I guess I have to go back to a 3 o'clock outside the waistband again and go do some, which I could wheel gun it, or maybe, I do have that FXH45. IDP is fairly low round count. It's kind of expensive right now, but maybe I'll take that. I think I got to see if I got a holster that will fit it for outside the waistband. Yeah. So I've never done IDP. I've done USPSA before quite a bit, and I've done something else, a couple other things called GAPA, which is just in Georgia, which is more practical. You can't stay static like USPSA is. Sprint, stop, boom, 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 boom. Sprint, stop. It's more about using cover kind of thing. But I hope I like IDPA. Have you ever done IDPA or USPSA?
No, I don't think I have. The pistol matches that I've been in have been other types of things, but they've not been like an IDPA sanctioned or USPSA or anything like that. So no.
Okay. For a carry revolver nowadays, is it pretty much you would recommend something like 19 or 66 was a 2.5 to 3 inch barrel? Is that if it was primary carry, not a J frame or something like that?
Are you talking about for a concealed handgun?
Yeah, for civilian and concealed, but they want a revolver. We got Sweet Dreams here. Says he likes the old Smith & Wesson 6.59, but he prefers large caliber revolvers. I don't know if he means 357 or he means 44 Special, 45 Colt, or what. But some of these guys they like to carry a revolver as their primary carry.
And especially for a concealed handgun, a good wheel gun has a lot going for it. It's extremely reliable, extremely simple. Typically they're a point and click type of an operating system. You don't have nearly as much to be cognizant of. I shouldn't say it that way. There's not as much to worry about, maybe I should say, with a good revolver as opposed to a semi-auto. Just there's something to be said for that absolute simplicity. And even the older, like a Smith & Wesson Model 10, I don't know if you remember the old 3-inch Model 10s or even the Model 13.
I've been tempted on some trading forums to pick one up because it's hard to find them in 3-inch barrel. I have a thing for 3-inch. I like the looks, the ballistics, whether 38 or 357 is really so much better than the little Pug 1 7/8 or 2-inch barrels, and I think the balance is better. So I've been tempted.
And even to this day, that's going to solve 85 or 90% of the problems somebody might have in a defensive situation. That just absolute, dependable, simple firearm that's going to be there because it's easy to carry. It's chambered for a reasonably effective cartridge. It's not something that generates tons and tons of recoil. Like I said, for most defensive situations, I think that's still going to work just fine.
Guys, for myself, I have a few videos on the subject. My first one that really blew up. Now, I'm new to revolvers. I didn't start as a wheel gun guy. I shot pistols since I was a kid. My grandfather had all pistols. I didn't shoot revolvers. I mean, other than occasionally renting like a Smith & Wesson or SP-101 because it looked cool and that movie was Stone Cold. So I liked the SP-101 when I was younger. Other than renting them occasionally, when I was 15, 16, 17 years old, I was kind of a regular at a range. And I went to a Firearms Academy at 15 years old. I was the youngest graduate under this Detroit cop before he passed. I got into it recently. And so I have a video called, there's a 3-inch 7-shot 357 Magnum, a viable CCW option. So I have videos on that. Ruger GP100. That's a little heavy, 38 ounces. Taurus 692. That's a little more manageable, 3-inch at 35 ounces. They even occasionally have made a 2.5-inch barreled version of that. As a primary carry weapon, I think those are all very good, or 686 plus. As a smaller weapon, I know you like the J-frames. They're a little too thin for my hands. But I do have 2 videos. The second one isn't out yet. And a head-to-head, and I have separate unboxings of them. They've forgotten about my friend Slick 50's, old collection. He's got all kinds of stuff. Smith & Wesson Model 12 and the old beautiful Chrome Colt Detective Special. Mm-hmm. Now, I like those because they're 6 shots. 6 shots compared to 5, I think that's a 20% difference. I think that might matter. I'm not a capacity hoe like most of the YouTubers where I think you need 18, 20 rounds. Is that great if you're going to do 9mm? Yeah, you could need it. Like I said earlier, like 9 or 11 rounds of 45, I'm comfortable with that. 5 rounds of 38, unfortunately, most of my experiences where I've had to defensively display my pistol or revolver by putting my hand on the grip or throwing my jacket open or something along those lines, exactly half of my cases have been 2 to 5 attackers. So in FBI stats, it's at least 1/3 now, and it's like exponentially going up. And with everything we're seeing in the world, your possibility of it being more than one attacker is going up. It's unless you're in a small town and whatever. But in general, I just think that the potentiality for multiple attackers is going up. Will it solve most? Yeah, because a defensive display solves 2 to 3 million cases a year, where good guys only have to actually fire, mostly because we're scared of getting in trouble or going through a court case and having to lose our house to pay for the lawyers. Only like 268 times a year. So out of 2 to 3 million, and yes, those are more the accurate stats than the 300,000 the anti-gun environment wants to claim. When you look at the CDC stats they hit and everything else, it's like 1 to 3 million times. More probably like 2 to 3 million times a year that a good guy has to defensively display his weapon. So yeah, in most cases, you're not going to have to fire rounds. But I will say this, where they say 3 rounds, 3 yards, 3 seconds. But if you look at Tom Gibbons' instructors, a lot of them probably were 3 to 5 rounds, but quite a few of them were 8 to 11, and one was 12 rounds to solve the situation. And oftentimes that is just one attacker. And recently we saw one cop, the guy came at him with a stick, like a kendo-looking branch, and he just came like a zombie yelling at the cop, trying to hit him in the arms until the 12th shot of, I assume, 9mm. So all I'm saying is revolvers are awesome, but keep that in mind. And if you're going to carry a J-frame, I say carry 2. If you're going to carry a lightweight 5 or 6 shot revolver, a J-frame or 8.56 Taurus ultralight's a good choice. 2, 16 ounces, 6 shots. Carry 2. They're light. You got a lot of pockets. Why not? So that's my take on it. I'd be more likely to carry a Hellcat than just one 5-shot or 6-shot. But nothing wrong with carrying 2. Lions Quest Fitness, he carries a 5 or 6-shot revolver. Greg, who I had on last week, who was 20 years in law enforcement. But I get it when he's at work, carry a little snub in your pocket, but you're going in a Walmart, put on another revolver out of your lock safe in your center console or your glove box. And before walking into Walmart, I say put on a second revolver. And Sweet Dreams agrees with me. At the New York reload, the fastest reload is a second revolver. I mean, it works for Jim Cirillo and his partner. I always forget his name. I actually had more shootouts than Jim. Dave Adila. I can't think of the name right now. Anyone can think of Jim Cirillo's partner's name? Let me know. But yeah. But you like the big bore. You like the big bore revolvers too, but those are too heavy to carry. I would love a 45 ACP Smith & Wesson or a 610. Those are getting expensive to find, though. 10 millimeter or 45, but those are getting pretty heavy to carry.
They're carryable, although typically when I'm carrying one of those, I'm out wandering through the woods or walking my dog through the fields that are way out behind my house or something like that. I look at those more as field handguns that are just, there's just something reassuring about having a large bore revolver with you when you're out wandering around the countryside and you don't know just exactly what you're going to come across.
Yeah, practical, unless you're like up north and you got to worry about lions, tigers, bears, oh my. I think if ammo was inexpensive, I'd probably be in a 44 Magnum and even 10 millimeter, probably more 10 millimeter, but it's expensive. Someday I want to get in a 10 millimeter, or at least like ones like Old Smith Auto or Glock that I think it's pretty safe-ish, and I'm not telling you to do it, but to shoot 40 in it, you can, and a lot of them, and the revolvers, it's safe to do. And the autos, probably. But it's expensive. And I don't live in the Northwest, so I don't really have a need for like 44 Magnum. 357's enough recoil for me. 125s I can handle fine. 158s hurt my thumb where I keep re-cracking. I think that might have been what originally broke my thumb. We broke it going with that Tomiki AIKIDO video that blew up from a couple weeks ago, who teaches the military. Do you think that you do have a 10 millimeter Rock Island?
I do.
What do you think about 10 millimeter and 44 Magnum and kind of the bigger bore stuff?
As how they compare to each other, or just
in general? And I mean, if I had to worry about bears, if I was in Alaska or even like Montana or something, it would be a lot more like kind of a viable need, I think. But
I like the 44 Magnum for a hunting cartridge, and I've used that deer hunting many times. I've shot a lot of deer with the 44 Magnum and
revolver,
yeah.
Okay.
And if you place your shot, you don't have to track a deer very far if you've shot it with a 44. It's just a very good hunting cartridge. The 10 millimeter I look at a little bit more as a general purpose field cartridge, something that, if you encounter whatever, feral dogs or some other kind of creature that decides it doesn't like you and wants to punctuate that by taking a chunk out of your body, it is going to work well in that regard. I've got both the 10 millimeter Rock Island Armory 1911. I've also got a Smith & Wesson 1076. So it kind of does that dual role between the 10 millimeter, between defensive use and, field use. It's one of those general purpose do-all cartridges, kind of like the 357 Magnum. And in that regard, I like it. It's just a useful cartridge. It's a fun cartridge. It's a fairly easy cartridge to hand load, which I do a lot of. So I like it.
I agree. I think 10 millimeter, other than the price, is a great cartridge. I mean, Jeff Cooper originally, in fact, the 1911 was really supposed to not have a grip safety and be in 40 cal. If you really look at things, it was originally supposed to be a 200 grain 40 cal bullet, which means 10 millimeter heavy. But I digress. I think 10 millimeter, yeah, if you're this guy, Sweet Dreams saying he's in Oregon, has to worry about cougars and bears, I think a 10 millimeter, like if I was in Alaska, I'm more worried about the meth head people in Anchorage than the bears, but I got to worry about the bears too. Yeah, I'd probably be packing a Glock 10 millimeter, to be honest, even though I was ripping on Glock earlier. Quite frankly, if I got to worry about a lot of bad humans on meth and drug dealers, but I also got to worry about lions, tigers, and bears, oh my, 10 millimeter, if you got to worry about two-legged and four-legged, 10 millimeter is, is a really good sweet spot. It really is. Because you can also tailor made, one magazine for bears and whatever. But I mean, most hollow points, even a 45 does good on a bear most of the time, unless it ricochets off because it's rounded against the skull. Even a 22 against a bear has been successful in the past. So, but 10 millimeter, I think, is a good cartridge. Guys, if you have any specific questions, now's the time. If you got any specific questions, let's give them to either Hrfunk or myself or both. Bill Allard. Thank you, ERJ. That's who I was thinking of. Bill Allard. He was even in more shootouts than Jim. So, I don't know why Jim Cirillo gets mentioned more than Jim Allard, but Jim Allard definitely deserves a lot of the mentions there as well. Of course, Cirillo carried a 4-inch Model 10, and then he had the 2-inch Detective Special. And as I pointed out in my unboxing, my review videos of Colt Detective, it could take the same 6-shot HKS speed loaders that the Smith & Wesson revolvers do. So I think some of the guys that knew they were going into gunfights try to get a Colt Detective or a Model 12 Smith & Wesson as their backup to use the same speed loaders instead of the more typical 5-shot J-frame. Here's a question from Drifter17. What do you think of the 45-70 for hunting?
Depends on what you're hunting. I don't think I'd use it for rabbits, but for anything large, something on the lines of like deer, it's a great cartridge. I've shot 45-70s. I don't own one. I have a 444 Marlin, which is similar ballistically, and again, very, very good cartridge.
Okay. I can kind of answer this, I think. Sweet Dreams, Saw, M&P, basic front post, M&P 15. Does the tall front sight get in the way of the sight picture in the scope? I'm sure it seems it would. I think I have the answer to this, and I think it is that no, it doesn't. It becomes a lower 1/3 if you use a typical riser that comes with a hollow sun, or many of them. A typical riser is, I don't know, maybe an inch and 1/8, something like that. If you're, I'm assuming a red dot or whatever, your scope, maybe if you're talking a regular scope, it doesn't come with a riser. But if you're talking a red dot, I think the riser, that's a typical, I forget what you call the front post, the A4 style. I think that's right, an A4 style front post.
Well, yeah, or A2 style. I know what you're talking about.
Yeah. So if it's a typical, which it is on the Smith & Wesson, I think you're good to go. If you're talking telescopic sight, it probably doesn't have the riser. So you might have to buy a riser separately. But if you're talking red dot, I think it comes where the dot will be in the middle, and you really don't want what some people think is a true co-witness. You really want a lower 1/3. It'll do a lower 1/3 for you. Does that sound right to you, HR, or am I wrong?
Well, I've seen it both ways, actually. It depends a little bit on if it's a magnified optic, on the power of the optic and how high you have it mounted. If it's a high enough power, it's going to look out past that front sight and you're not going to even see it. If it's a lower power, if you got something that's down around, a 2 power or 3 power and you've got it dialed back down, or if it's a fixed power that's a real low like that and the scope itself is mounted somewhat low, then you're going to get some of that front sight housing in your field of view, but it should be toward the lower part of it. It should, if anything, it should just be another reference in the field of view of the optic, not necessarily a distraction. I've never had a problem with it. I'll put it that way.
Yeah, you have much more knowledge when it comes to magnified optics. Does it kind of depend on scope rings and height?
Yes.
Okay. So it sounds like sweet dreams. If you're talking optic, not red dot, you can hopefully figure it out. And maybe different size rings, height rings will make it work eventually. But I think you can make that work. I don't think it having that front post is that big of a. I think there's workarounds. I don't think it's a no-no. Okay, ERJG 1954. How would I like the 405? I have no idea. Oh, that's like an old elephant gun cartridge. I don't know anything about that other than reading about it a couple times. 405 and the 1895 Winchester, the best. The Shiloh Sharps in 4570. 1954, was that the year you died? were you a gold miner in the 1800s? Shiloh Sharps 4570. I don't know much about that other than that had the old huge. You could make, Buffalo, and I think that's in one of those old movies, wasn't it? Was that Quigley Down Under? A Shiloh Sharps with a big. You can increment it all the way up, and I think that was 4570.
That was a Sharps rifle that he had, and ERJG actually loaned me both of those rifles that he's talking about.
Okay.
The 405 Winchester, the 1895 Winchester was actually Teddy Roosevelt's rifle, and he liked it chambered for the 405 for use in his African safaris. The Shiloh Sharps that I used was actually a Shiloh Sharps carbine that was chambered for the 4570. Nice little carbine, and still packed a lot of punch behind it.
So I guess you got your answer there. What were the old the Sharps rifles that were being used out west? Would they have been a 4570 to hunt buffalo, or what was the Buffalo 458? What was the Buffalo?
There were several of them. There was the one that was used in a Quigley movie, I think, was a 45 110. There were a lot of those big old cartridges, and I'm going to have a hard time pulling them up from memory. The 4570 would have actually been on the small end of what they used for the Buffaloes back then.
Too bad. I like Buffalo burgers. I wish they were around more. I can't. There's like no restaurants that have them. I like Buffalo. Buffalo's good. Guys, any last questions for either of us? Shoot them in right now. Otherwise, we're basically going to start wrapping up. Guys, please help me out. Even this video and last week, now that I broached this, might have made my podcast with Greg Linequest Fitness. If you like more firearms talk, check out my last podcast, Greg Linequest Fitness. Subscribe to Hrfunk. Check out his t-shirts. Who's making your t-shirts for you? WarbirdBunker.com is making these t-shirts, and this is the one that he designed for me. So I wore that today. And he's also got a lot of other ones on there that all of them are firearms or patriotic themed. So this one, I actually came up with this idea years ago. I thought it was kind of funny, and he brought it to life by putting it on a t-shirt for me. Let's see if one of these doggies wants to say hi. Come here. Can you get up here? Oh, I'm going to pick you up. Let's see if you go crazy. Say hi to everybody. Pit bulls are good dogs, guys. Go adopt a pit. Pits are good dogs. They get a bad rep as well. Just like the 40 caliber. Guys, please help me out. You know the algorithm. Get down in the comments after this airs. If you're still watching, put a comment below the YouTube video. And all my firearms reviews, especially my latest ones on the FXH45 and all my revolver reviews. Please, guys, obviously, powers that be don't like us having the constitutionally, universally God-given right of the Second Amendment, and that we actually enjoy things and to be, do things with our families and things like that. So, having said that, HR, is there anything else you want to say?
Just thanks to everybody for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. I had a good time, Dan, so thanks for inviting me here. Feel honored to be one of your guests on the podcast, so wish you all the best in the future.
I appreciate it very much. Thank you very much for coming on, Howard. And guys, we're not only on YouTube now, we're on Spotify and 5 or 6 other podcasts. Eventually, it'll probably be on 10 different podcasts. So any truck drivers out there, spread the word. Breaker, tell other people about the podcast on Spotify and different podcast things that I know nothing about, but I'm there now. I'm there now. We're there now. The Dan the Wolfman podcast. We got a better looking studio. Lighting's not perfect yet. I know I would probably want a light up here as well. But guys, I look crazy tired because I've been doing a lot of stuff. Haven't taken allergy med and around all these dogs. But hopefully you like the new studio setup. Hopefully the quality was better. Give it a thumbs up, a share, a comment, a subscribe. And thank you very much. Catch you on the flip side. Thanks, everybody. Bye, Howard.
Bye-bye, Dan.